Good day, lovely viewers. Welcome to Cross Naruto. We have an exciting story lined up for you today. What if Naruto was the divine wind sage, the storm god who protected Mondstadt? Naruto x Raiden eix Furina. Your engagement means the world to us. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow and bring you more amazing content. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1. Winds of change. The skies over Mondstadt darkened as swirling clouds gathered unnaturally fast. Citizens looked up, their faces showing a mix of concern and resignation. They'd seen this before. Market vendors hurriedly packed their wares. Parents ushered children indoors. Knights of Favonius took defensive positions along the city walls. Atop the highest tower of the Knights' headquarters, a figure stood watching, his white sage cloak billowing dramatically against the gathering storm. Blonde hair whipped around his face as his blue eyes narrowed at the horizon. "They're back sooner than I expected," Naruto muttered, rolling his shoulders. He glanced down at Jean, the acting Grand Master who had just joined him on the tower. "How many?" she asked, her voice calm but her hand already resting on her sword hilt. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his senses outward. "At least 50 regular troops. 3 mages." His eyes snapped open. "And something new. Something bigger." Jean nodded grimly. "The city's evacuation protocols are active. What's your plan?" Naruto grinned, that same cocky smile that hadn't changed despite everything else that had. "Same as always. I'll keep them busy while you get the civilians to safety." He cracked his knuckles. "Then I'll kick their asses back to the abyss." Before Jean could respond, Naruto leapt from the tower, free-falling toward the ground hundreds of feet below. Wind rushed around him, not fighting his descent but cushioning it, becoming almost solid beneath his feet. The citizens of Mondstadt had seen this enough times that some even paused their evacuations to watch. "Show off," Jean murmured, but there was a smile on her face as she hurried to organize the knights. Naruto landed at the main gate just as the first shadows emerged from the tree line, twisted humanoid figures with masks that glowed an unearthly blue. Abyss Order foot soldiers, once human but now corrupted by abyssal energy. Behind them floated the mages, their elaborate robes billowing around them as they prepared their spells. And behind them all, towering over the trees, was something new. A massive construct of dark energy that vaguely resembled a ruined guard but 3 times larger and pulsing with abyssal corruption. "Seriously?" Naruto said to no one in particular. "You guys just don't learn, do you?" The first wave of abyss troops charged. Naruto didn't move, just stood there with his hands in his pockets. When they were 20 feet away, he finally smirked. "Wind style, divine gale palm." He thrust his hand forward, and what erupted wasn't just wind, it was a concentrated hurricane compressed into a blast the size of a small house. The front line of abyss troops didn't just get pushed back, they were completely obliterated, turning to particles of dark energy that scattered in the wind. But more kept coming. Naruto weaved between attacks with fluid grace, his movements almost too fast for normal eyes to track. Each punch landed with devastating force, each kick sent enemies flying. This wasn't the raw power of his youth, this was refined, controlled divine energy channeled with perfect precision. An abyss mage teleported behind him, already casting a cage of energy to trap him. Without even looking, Naruto flipped backward over the spell, landing directly behind the surprised mage. "You know," he said conversationally as he grabbed the mage by its robe, "I've been doing this for 2 years now. You'd think you guys would try something new." He spun the mage around and hurled it into a group of oncoming soldiers. The massive construct was getting closer, each step shaking the ground. Naruto glanced back at the city walls where archers were taking positions. He created a shadow clone with a casual hand sign. "Go help Jean make sure everyone's safe," he told his duplicate, who nodded and dashed toward the city. Alone now facing the approaching behemoth, Naruto took a deep breath. Golden energy began to outline his body as he entered Sage mode, the natural energy of Teyvat flowing through him differently than it had in his home world. Here, the elements themselves responded to his call. "Alright, big guy," he called out to the construct. "Let's see what you've got." The construct raised one massive fist and brought it crashing down. Naruto didn't dodge, he raised both hands and caught the blow, his feet creating small craters in the earth as he absorbed the impact. The force sent shock waves through the area, flattening grass and bending trees. "Not bad," Naruto grunted, pushing back against the enormous weight. "But I've arm wrestled with worse." With a surge of strength, he shoved the fist upward, causing the construct to stumble backward. Not giving it time to recover, Naruto leapt into the air, drawing on the wind to propel him higher until he was level with the construct's mask-like face. Wind style, Raisen Shuriken. The spinning disk of wind chakra formed in his hand, but unlike in his world, here it shimmered with anemo energy, the power of Mondstadt's winds infusing his technique. He hurled it directly at the construct's core. The attack connected with a deafening roar, expanding into a dome of slicing wind that carved through the abyssal creation like it was paper. The construct collapsed, its energy dissipating into the air. Naruto landed lightly on the ground, already turning to face the remaining forces. The Abyss troops hesitated, seeing their champion destroyed so easily. "Anyone else?" Naruto called out, not even breathing hard. The remaining soldiers retreated, melting back into the forest surrounding Mondstadt. The mages teleported away with flashes of dark energy. Within minutes, the battlefield was empty except for Naruto and the scattered remains of those who hadn't escaped. He sighed, letting Sage mode fade. "They're getting bolder," he murmured to himself, looking at the fallen construct. "And more resourceful." As he turned back toward the city, memories flooded his mind unbidden, memories of how he'd first arrived in this strange world. 2 years earlier, the final battle of the Fourth Great Ninja War had reached its climax. Kagaya had been sealed, but something went wrong. The dimensional rift didn't close properly. Naruto, exhausted from the battle and already having given so much of his chakra, was pulled into the collapsing portal. He remembered spinning through darkness, feeling his body being torn apart and reassembled. He remembered Kurama's roar of defiance as the fox tried to anchor them to reality. He remembered pain, then nothing. When he woke up, he was lying in a field of dandelions beneath a massive oak tree. The air felt different, charged with energy unlike anything he'd known. And Kurama. Kurama was gone, but not in the way he'd feared. The Nine-Tails chakra had somehow merged with his own, transformed by whatever force had brought him to this world. That first week had been chaos. Discovering his changed powers. Learning he was in a world called Teyvat. Finding Mondstadt, a city of freedom protected by the absent Anemo Archon, Barbatos. What Naruto hadn't expected was how the people reacted to him. To them, his control of wind wasn't just ninjutsu, it was divine. The power of an Archon, they said. When he'd inadvertently purified a corrupted ley line with his sage mode, the rumors spread like wildfire. Naruto Uzumaki, the divine wind sage. Mondstadt's new protector. He denied it at first. He wasn't a god, just a shinobi far from home. But when the Abyss Order attacked the first time, targeting the city because of its weakened state without Barbatos, Naruto couldn't stand by. He'd protected the city with every ounce of his transformed power. And afterward, when the sky briefly glowed in Celestia, the realm of gods that floated impossibly in Teyvat's sky, shone a light down upon him, even Naruto had to admit something divine had happened to him in the transition between worlds. "The evacuation is complete," Jean reported as Naruto walked back through Mondstadt's main gate. His shadow clone had already dispersed, giving him its memories of helping the last few citizens to safety. "No casualties this time." "Good," Naruto replied, shaking off the memories of his arrival. "But they're getting stronger." That construct was new. "The Abyss Order has been growing bolder across all nations," Jean said, falling into step beside him as they walked through the city. Citizens were already returning to their homes, many stopping to bow or wave to Naruto. He still wasn't completely comfortable with the reverence, but he'd gotten better at acknowledging it with a smile or nod. There are reports of similar attacks in Liyue. And in Azuma? Jean shook her head. The Electro Archon has closed the borders entirely. No news comes in or out these days. Naruto frowned. He'd heard stories about Raiden Ei, the god of eternity who ruled in Azuma with an iron fist. Her isolation policy was becoming legendary, and problematic for the rest of Teyvat. We've received a message from the Adventurers Guild, Jean continued as they approached the Knights' headquarters. They've detected unusual energy readings from the ruins north of here. Similar to Abyss energy, but different somehow. I'll check it out, Naruto said immediately. When did the report come in? Just this morning. I was about to assemble a team when the attack began. Naruto glanced at the sky, judging the time. It's still early. I can make it there and back before dark. Jean looked like she wanted to argue. She always preferred sending teams rather than letting Naruto go alone, but experience had taught her that the Wind Sage operated best independently. Take this at least, she said, handing him a small communication device, one of the magical gadgets developed by Mondstadt scholars. If there's trouble, call for backup. Naruto pocketed the device with a grin. There's always trouble. That's what makes it fun. He was gone in a flash of yellow and white, moving so fast that many didn't even see him leave the city. One moment he was at the gates, the next he was a distant figure leaping through the trees to the north. The forest blurred around Naruto as he ran, occasionally launching himself high into the air with bursts of wind to get his bearings. The ruins Jean mentioned were about an hour away at normal travel speed, but Naruto could make it in 15 minutes if he pushed himself. As he traveled, he let his mind wander to the situation in Teyvat. 7 nations, each protected by one of the 7 archons, gods who governed an element. But things were changing. Rex Lapis of Liyue had supposedly died, Naruto had his doubts. Barbatos of Mondstadt was perpetually absent. The god of wisdom in Sumeru was increasingly reclusive. And Raiden Ei, she'd shut her entire nation away from the world. What kind of god abandons their people? Naruto muttered as he leapt across a ravine. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had never asked to be divine now served as protector while those born to it seemed to be stepping away. The ruins appeared ahead, ancient stone structures half reclaimed by nature. Once part of old Mondstadt, they dated back to the aristocracy period before Barbatos liberated the city. Naruto slowed as he approached, extending his senses. There was definitely something here, an energy that felt wrong, discordant with the natural flow. He moved carefully among the fallen columns and crumbling walls. At the center of the ruins stood what might once have been a temple, its roof long gone but its circular structure still intact. And in the middle of that circle. What the hell? Naruto whispered, crouching behind a broken wall. A tear hung in the air, there was no other way to describe it. Like someone had taken a knife to reality itself and cut a narrow, vertical slice. Dark energy pulsed around the edges, and through the opening, Naruto could see nothing. Not darkness, not another place. Simply nothing, a void that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Movement caught his attention. 3 figures stood near the tier, 2 in the elaborate masks of Abyss heralds and 1 in an outfit Naruto didn't recognize, a long coat with a distinctive mask that covered the upper half of their face. Fatui, Naruto realized. He'd encountered the diplomats from Snezhnaya before, but this was no diplomat. This was a harbinger, one of the 11 most powerful agents of the Cryo Archon. The readings are consistent, the harbinger was saying, consulting some kind of device. This tear leads directly to the void between worlds. As we told you, one of the heralds replied, its voice distorted and echoing. The prince will be most pleased with your cooperation. The Tsaritsa does not cooperate, the harbinger said coldly. She commands. Remember that. Naruto had heard enough. Whatever alliance was forming between the Abyss Order and the Fatui, it couldn't be good news for Mondstadt, or for him, if they were investigating tiers between worlds. He created 3 shadow clones with silent hand movements, positioning them around the temple ruins. Then, with a subtle manipulation of wind, he launched himself high into the air, directly above the gathering. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he called out as he plummeted downward. The Harbinger reacted instantly, whirling and firing what looked like a crossbow bolt infused with cryo-energy. Naruto deflected it with a kunai pulled from his pouch, landing in a crouch between the group and the tear in reality. "The Wind Sage," one herald hissed. "The anomaly," the other added with what sounded like hunger in its voice. The Harbinger simply studied him, head tilted slightly. "Interesting. The report said you were powerful, but they didn't mention you were so direct." Naruto straightened, keeping all 3 opponents in his field of vision. "I'm a simple guy. I see bad guys messing with dangerous stuff, I stop them." "Simple. There's nothing simple about you," the Harbinger replied. "A god who isn't from Celestia. A wind user who doesn't draw power from the ley lines. You're an aberration, and the Tsaritsa is very interested in aberrations." One of Naruto's clones chose that moment to attack from behind, launching at the nearest herald with a Rasengan ready. The herald spun with unnatural speed, blocking the attack with a shield of dark energy, but the distraction was enough. Naruto's other 2 clones attacked the remaining opponents while he himself darted toward the tear. Up close, the wrongness of it made his skin crawl. It reminded him of the dimensional portal that had brought him here, the same nothingness that had nearly torn him apart. "We can't let them close it yet," the Harbinger shouted, disengaging from Naruto's clone to lunge toward him. "The data collection isn't complete." Naruto formed a hand seal, focusing his wind chakra. "Sorry to ruin your research, but dimensional tiers aren't toys." He thrust both palms toward the tear, sending a controlled tornado of wind directly into the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tear began to shrink, the edges pulling toward each other as the wind pressure pushed it closed from within. "Stop him!" the Harbinger commanded. One herald broke away from fighting a clone and charged Naruto, dark energy coalescing into a blade. Naruto didn't move from his position, maintaining the wind pressure on the tear. At the last second, he formed a one-handed Rasengan without looking, a skill he'd perfected years ago, and thrust it backward into the charging herald. The impact sent the herald flying into a stone column, which crumbled under the force. Naruto grimaced as the tear resisted his attempts to close it, growing wider for a moment before continuing to shrink. "This isn't natural," he muttered, pouring more power into his technique. His eyes began to glow with golden energy as he partially entered Sage mode, drawing on the natural energy around him. The tear finally collapsed with a sound like thunder, the implosion sending a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. Naruto rolled with the impact, coming up in a defensive stance as dust and debris settled around them. The Harbinger was already getting to their feet, the fallen heralds dissolving into particles of dark energy. "You have no idea what you've done," they said, voice tight with anger. "Stopped you from messing with forces you don't understand," Naruto suggested, dispelling his remaining clones as they were no longer needed. "Quite the opposite." The Harbinger straightened their coat. "But you'll learn soon enough. The Tsaritsa sends her regards, and looks forward to meeting the Wind Sage who isn't an Archon." Before Naruto could respond, the Harbinger threw down a smoke bomb. By the time the air cleared, they were gone. Naruto surveyed the ruins, now quiet except for the wind whistling through broken stones. Where the tear had been, nothing remained, not even residual energy. It was as if it had never existed. "That can't be good," he said to himself, releasing Sage mode and feeling the strain of the battle catching up with him. The tear had resisted his power in a way few things in Teyvat did. He pulled out the communication device Jean had given him. "Jean, it's Naruto. We've got problems. Big ones." Back in Mondstadt, the Knights' headquarters had become a war room. Jean stood at the center table, reviewing reports while Amber, Kia, and Lisa, three of her most trusted knights, debated the implications of Naruto's discovery. The Fatui working with the Abyss Order? That doesn't make sense, Amber insisted, pacing nervously. They hate each other. Politics makes for strange bedfellows, Kia replied with his usual sardonic smile. The question is, what do they gain from studying tears in reality? Lisa, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Power. What else? She looked up from the ancient tome she'd been consulting. If they could control the space between worlds, they could potentially access power beyond what's available in Teyvat. The door opened, and Naruto walked in, looking tired but alert. He'd pushed himself to return quickly, using more of his wind techniques to practically fly back to the city. Any other tears been reported? He asked without preamble. Jean shook her head. Not yet, but I've sent scouts to check other ancient ruins in our territory. We should warn the other nations, Naruto said, dropping into an empty chair. Whatever the Fatui and Abyss Order are planning, it won't be limited to Mondstadt. Easier said than done, Kia pointed out. Liyue might listen, but Inazuma has closed its borders. No messages in or out. Naruto's expression hardened. Then I'll deliver the message personally. A shocked silence fell over the room. Even Jean looked taken aback. To Inazuma? Lisa finally asked. Naruto, that's impossible. The Raiden Shogun has implemented the Sakoku decree. The storms surrounding the nation destroy any ship that approaches. I don't need a ship, Naruto replied with a confidence that came from years of doing the impossible. I can use Sage Mode to cross the ocean. The winds will carry me. And when you arrive? Jean asked quietly. The Electro Archon is not known for her hospitality to uninvited guests, especially foreign gods encroaching on her territory. Naruto leaned forward. Look, I don't want to challenge another Archon. But these tears in reality? They're connected to how I got here. I can feel it. And if the Fatui and Abyss Order are investigating them, everyone in Teyvat is at risk, including Inazuma. He stood up, his decision made. I'll leave tomorrow morning. With luck, I can reach Inazuma in 2 days. Jean looked like she wanted to argue further but instead nodded reluctantly. Take supplies. And for Barbato's sake, try not to start a war with the Electro Archon. Naruto grinned, some of his usual energy returning. No promises. She sounds like she could use someone to shake up her eternal routine anyway. As the meeting continued, discussing contingency plans and defensive measures, Naruto's mind drifted to what little he knew about Raiden Ei. The god of eternity, ruling her nation with absolute authority, isolating her people from the outside world in pursuit of unchanging permanence. He couldn't imagine a philosophy more opposed to his own. Change, growth, connection, these were the things Naruto valued above all else. The thought of confronting a deity who rejected these principles stirred something in him, curiosity, maybe. Or challenge. Either way, he was about to meet his first fellow Archon, and something told him it wouldn't be a peaceful encounter. Dawn broke over Mondstadt, painting the windmills and towers in golden light. Naruto stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the vast lake that separated the city from the rest of Teyvat, his travel pack secured to his back. He'd said his goodbyes to Jean and the others the night before, preferring to leave without ceremony. Going somewhere exciting? Naruto didn't need to turn to recognize Vendi's voice, the tone perpetually balanced between drunk and whimsical. The small bard sauntered up beside him, lyre in hand as always. You know where I'm going, Naruto replied. Of all the people in Mondstadt, only Vendi knew his true nature, just as Naruto was one of the few who knew Vendi was actually Barbatos, the absent Anemo Archon. Inazuma is lovely this time of year, Vendi said airily, plucking a few notes. Or it would be, if anyone were allowed to see it. Naruto glanced at the bard. You could come with me, you know. Archon to Archon might make for an easier conversation with EI. Venti laughed. Oh no, I think not. EI and I have history. Ancient history, but gods have long memories. He strummed a chord. Besides, she'd be much more interested in you. A new divinity not born of Celestia. You're practically a walking blasphemy. Thanks, Naruto said dryly. That'll make negotiating easier. I didn't say she wouldn't like you, Venti said with a mischievous smile. EI appreciates power, and you have plenty of that. Just don't mention me. Naruto shook his head, wondering as he often did how this carefree, wine-loving bard could be one of the original 7. Any actual advice before I go? Venti's expression sobered slightly. Be careful with the tears in reality. They don't belong in this world, or any world. Whatever force is creating them. It's not something even gods should meddle with. The Fatui seem to think differently. The Fatui serve the Tsaritsa, and her rebellion against divine principles is well documented. Venti fingered a spot on his chest absently, where, Naruto knew, the Fatui had once forcibly taken his gnosis. Just remember that in Inazuma, EI's word is absolute. No appeals, no exceptions. We'll see about that, Naruto said with a confident grin. He closed his eyes, golden energy beginning to outline his body as he entered Sage mode. In this state, he could sense the natural energy for miles, the currents of wind, the flow of water, the steady pulse of the earth. Venti stepped back, watching with undisguised interest. Your power really is different from ours. Not better or worse, just different. I wonder what EI will make of it. Naruto opened his eyes, now ringed with orange markings of Sage mode. Guess I'll find out. He gave Venti a mock salute. Keep an eye on Mondstadt while I'm gone, yeah. Actually be the Archon for a few days. I'm always watching, Venti replied, his voice momentarily deeper, more resonant, a brief glimpse of Barbados beneath the barred disguise. Then he grinned, the moment passing. Safe travels, Divine Wind Sage. Naruto nodded, then turned toward the east where Inazuma lay beyond the horizon. With a sudden burst of chakra, he leapt from the cliff, wind swirling around him to carry him forward. Instead of falling, he shot across the lake's surface, moving so fast he barely touched the water. Behind him, Venti watched until the yellow and white figure was just a speck in the distance. Interesting times ahead, the Anemo Archon murmured, turning back toward the city he pretended not to rule. Crossing the ocean between Mondstadt and Inazuma tested even Naruto's immense stamina. He alternated between running atop the water using chakra control and using wind techniques to literally fly short distances when his legs needed rest. By sunset of the second day, he could see dark clouds on the horizon, the perpetual storm that surrounded Inazuma, enforcing EI's isolation decree. Even from a distance, Naruto could feel the raw electrical energy pulsing within those clouds. That's gonna be fun, he muttered, pausing on a small rocky outcropping to catch his breath and restore his chakra. As night fell, he made camp on the tiny islet, building a small fire and eating some of the provisions Jean had insisted he take. Looking toward the storm, Naruto found himself wondering about the god who maintained such a powerful barrier around her nation. What would drive someone to cut themselves off so completely? As someone who had spent his childhood isolated and rejected, Naruto understood the pain of loneliness. But to impose that isolation on an entire nation? That spoke of something deeper, fear, perhaps. Or trauma. Morning came with gray skies and choppy seas. Naruto packed his minimal camp and stood facing the storm barrier, now close enough that he could see lightning arcing within the dark clouds. All right, Raiden EI, he said, cracking his knuckles. Let's see how your lightning does against my wind. He entered Sage mode once more, feeling the natural energy flow through him. The storm ahead was anything but natural, it was divine energy given purpose, a manifestation of the Electro Archon's will. To pass through it, Naruto would need to match that divine intent with his own. Running across the water's surface, he approached the storm wall at tremendous speed. As he reached the boundary, lightning lashed out at him, not random strikes but targeted attacks, as if the storm itself could sense his intrusion. Naruto formed hand seals on the fly. Wind style, divine shield. A sphere of compressed wind formed around him, deflecting the first lightning bolt. The impact still sent shockwaves through his body, making his teeth rattle. This wasn't ordinary lightning, it carried the concentrated will of an archon thousands of years old. More bolts struck, each more powerful than the last. Naruto's shield began to crack. Gritting his teeth, he poured more chakra into the technique, reinforcing it even as he continued pushing forward into the storm. Visibility dropped to near zero. Rain lashed at him from all directions, not falling but actively attacking. The wind, normally his ally, fought against him, trying to push him back. Not happening. Naruto growled, forming a Rasengan in one hand while maintaining his shield with the other. He infused the spinning orb with wind chakra, creating a variation of his Rasen Shuriken but keeping it compressed. When the next lightning bolt struck his shield, he thrust the Rasengan forward into the point of impact. The two energies, his concentrated wind and Ei's divine lightning, collided with a deafening explosion. For a moment, Naruto felt himself being hurled backward. Then he was through, the Rasengan having torn a temporary hole in the storm barrier just large enough for him to pass. He landed hard on what felt like solid ground, rolling to absorb the impact. When he came to a stop and looked up, the storm raged behind him, but ahead lay Inazuma, a series of islands dominated by a massive mountain at the center. Made it, Naruto panted, letting Sage Mode fade as he caught his breath. The crossing had taken more out of him than he'd expected. Ei's power was no joke. He'd landed on a beach at the southern edge of the main island. In the distance, he could see terraced rice fields leading up to what appeared to be a small village. The landscape was strikingly beautiful, lush and vibrant despite the perpetual storms surrounding the nation. Naruto took a moment to reorganize his pack and consider his approach. Walking into the capital and demanding an audience with the shogun seemed like a bad idea. But subtlety had never been his strong suit either. As he pondered his options, the decision was made for him. 6 figures in distinctive armor materialized around him, seemingly out of nowhere. Each wore a menacing mask and carried a glowing electro blade. "Intruder," one stated flatly. "You have violated the Sakoku decree. Surrender immediately. The shogunate has been alerted to your presence," another added. "Resistance is futile." Naruto slowly raised his hands, showing he wasn't planning to fight. "I'm just here to talk to Raiden Ei. I have important information about a threat to all nations, including Inazuma. The divine shogun does not grant audiences to trespassers," the lead soldier replied. "You will be detained until your fate is decided." Naruto could have easily overpowered them, even without using his full strength, he outmatched ordinary soldiers. But starting his diplomatic mission by beating up Inazuma's military seemed counterproductive. "Fine," he said, allowing his pack to be taken. "Lead the way." As they escorted him inland, Naruto noticed the soldiers exchanging nervous glances. One whispered to another, who then broke away from the group, moving ahead at high speed. "They're talking about my chakra," Naruto realized. Even suppressed, his divine energy was noticeable, different from the elemental energy native to Teyvat. The journey to Inazuma City took several hours, passing through carefully cultivated landscapes and small settlements where citizens stopped to stare at the foreigner being led by the shogun's elite forces. Naruto took the opportunity to observe Inazuman society, noting the strict military presence, the formality of interactions, and the underlying tension in people's movements. This was a nation under pressure, despite its outward beauty and order. Finally, they crested a hill, and Inazuma City spread out before them, a sprawling metropolis of traditional architecture, dominated by the imposing Tenshukaku Palace at its center. Even from a distance, Naruto could feel the concentration of electro energy emanating from the palace. EI was there, her power a constant hum in the air. Beautiful city, Naruto commented to his escorts. Bit heavy on the purple lightning motif, but I guess that's on brand. None of the soldiers responded, marching him through the city streets where citizens quickly moved aside, watching with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Many whispered behind their hands as he passed. At the palace gates, a new group awaited, soldiers in even more elaborate armor, led by a woman whose stern expression seemed permanently etched onto her face. Kuju Sera, one of his escorts announced, bowing deeply. We have brought the intruder as commanded. The woman, Sera, studied Naruto with intense eyes. Unlike the soldiers, she carried a large electro bow and wore a Tengu mask pushed up on her head. You passed through the Shogun's storm barrier, she stated, not a question but an accusation. No ordinary mortal could achieve this. Naruto shrugged. Never claimed to be ordinary. Something flickered in Sera's eyes, recognition, perhaps. Your energy, it's similar to that of an Archon, yet different. She straightened. The almighty Shogun has ordered you brought directly to her presence. This is unprecedented. Consider it either a great honor or your final moments. Hopefully the former, Naruto replied with an easy smile that seemed to disconcert her. Lead on. The interior of the palace was a study in calculated perfection, every element placed with precise intention, every detail contributing to an atmosphere of timeless authority. Guards stood at regular intervals, so still they might have been statues. Finally, they reached massive doors emblazoned with the electro symbol. Sera turned to Naruto one last time. When you enter, approach no closer than the designated mark on the floor. Speak only when addressed. Attempt nothing that could be interpreted as threatening. Her eyes narrowed. The Shogun's blade strikes faster than thought itself. Got it, Naruto said, more seriously now. I'm just here to talk, not fight. Sera nodded to the guards, who opened the doors. Beyond lay a vast throne room, mostly empty except for the raised dais at the far end where a solitary figure sat motionless. Naruto walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He stopped at the marking on the floor as instructed, about 20 feet from the throne. Raiden EI was both exactly what he expected and nothing like he imagined. She sat perfectly still, her posture impeccable, wearing elaborate robes and armor that spoke of both military might and divine authority. Her hair, an impossible purple-black, was styled in a complex arrangement that defied gravity. But it was her eyes that caught Naruto's attention, purple and luminous, they held the weight of millennia yet seemed somehow, distant. Detached. For a long moment, she simply observed him, not speaking. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then, finally, you carry divinity not sanctioned by Celestia. Her voice was cool, precise, with an underlying resonance that vibrated in Naruto's bones. Explain yourself. Naruto met her gaze directly. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm the divine wind sage of Mondstadt. And I'm here because there's a threat to all of Teyvat, including your eternity. Something flickered across EI's face, so quick Naruto almost missed it. Interest, perhaps. Or concern. Proceed, she commanded. And so Naruto explained, about the tears in reality, the Fatui's alliance with the Abyss Order, the danger they represented to the very fabric of Teyvat. As he spoke, he noticed subtle shifts in EI's expression, moments where her perfect mask slipped to reveal genuine reaction. These tears, she said when he finished, you believe they are connected to your arrival in our world? Naruto nodded. I was pulled through a dimensional rift during a battle in my world. When I arrived here, I was changed. The energy of this world transformed me into something new. Into a god, EI stated flatly. I guess so, though I never asked for it. This seemed to surprise her. Divinity is not something one refuses. Where I come from, we don't have gods like you, Naruto explained. We have powerful beings, sure, but not immortals ruling over nations. EI's eyes narrowed slightly. And yet you now protect Mondstadt in Barbados's absence. You have assumed the role of an Archon. I protect the city because it needs protecting, Naruto corrected. Not because I want to rule it. For the first time, EI's perfect posture shifted, just slightly, a minute tilting of her head. Interesting. She rose from her throne in one fluid motion, descending the steps with otherworldly grace. You crossed my storm barrier, a feat that should be impossible. You carry divine energy unlike any I have encountered in 7,000 years. She stopped several paces from him, close enough now that Naruto could feel the hair on his arm standing up from the electrical energy that surrounded her. I should execute you for trespassing, she said calmly. For violating the Sakoku decree and entering my domain uninvited. Naruto tensed but held his ground. You could try. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Behind him, he heard Sarah intake a sharp breath at his audacity. Then, astonishingly, EI's lips curved into the faintest smile. Yes. I believe I could. But perhaps not without significant disruption. Before Naruto could respond, the palace shook violently. A distant boom echoed through the city, followed by shouts and the clash of weapons. EI's expression hardened instantly. We are under attack. Sarah burst through the doors. Your Excellency. Abyss forces have breached the city's outer defenses. There, she stopped, eyes widening in disbelief. They're emerging from tiers in the air itself, appearing inside our defensive perimeter. Naruto and EI locked eyes, an instant understanding passing between them. Looks like my warning was right on time, Naruto said grimly. Want some help dealing with this? EI studied him for a moment longer, then gave a single, decisive nod. Very well, Wind Sage. Show me the power that breached my storm. She extended her hand, and a naginate materialized from pure electro energy, the famous Muzu no Hitotachi that legend spoke of. Naruto grinned, cracking his knuckles as he prepared to enter Sage mode once more. Let's give these abyss creeps a proper welcome to Inazuma. The scene in Inazuma City was chaos. Multiple tiers had opened throughout the district, each disgorging abyss creatures directly into the streets. Citizens fled in panic while shogunate forces struggled to contain the invasion. Naruto leapt to a rooftop for a better view, Sage mode already activated. From this vantage point, he could see at least 5 major tiers, each larger than the one he'd closed in Mondstadt. A flash of purple light announced EI's arrival beside him, her movement so fast it seemed like teleportation. She surveyed the battlefield with cold precision. Your Excellency. Sarah appeared, kneeling briefly before reporting. We've identified Fatui agents operating some kind of device near each tear. They appear to be directing the incursion. The Fatui dare. EI's voice was deadly quiet, electrical energy crackling around her. I told you they were working with the Abyss Order, Naruto said. We need to take out those devices. The tiers won't close on their own. EI nodded once. Sarah, coordinate the defense of civilians. The Wind Sage and I will deal with these invaders directly. Sarah looked surprised at the collaboration but bowed immediately. As you command. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones with quick hand signs. My clones will help evacuate citizens and support your troops. He turned to EI. Ready to show me how the Electro Archon fights. Something like anticipation flickered in EI's eyes. Try to keep up, Wind Sage. She vanished in a burst of lightning, reappearing at street level where she immediately cut through a group of abyss mages with a single sweep of her weapon. The precision and power were breathtaking, no wasted movement, just perfect, deadly efficiency. Naruto grinned and launched himself toward another tier. This was going to be interesting. For the next hour, Inazuma City became a battlefield unlike any in recent memory, 2 divine beings fighting side by side against the combined forces of the Abyss Order and Fatui agents. Naruto's wind techniques complemented EI's lightning strikes, creating combination effects that devastated enemy formations. When Naruto used his Raisen Shuriken against a particularly large abyss construct, EI infused it with her lightning mid-flight, turning the already devastating attack into a howling maelstrom of electrified wind that not only destroyed the construct but closed the nearby tear in a thunderous implosion. That worked well. Naruto called out, landing beside EI as they faced the next group of enemies. Let's try it again. For the briefest moment, something almost like enjoyment crossed EI's face, the thrill of battle alongside a worthy ally. Then her mask of divine composure returned, but she nodded. Your wind serves as an excellent conductor for my lightning, she acknowledged. A fortuitous combination. They moved through the city with devastating efficiency, closing tiers and eliminating threats. Naruto noticed that despite her fearsome power, EI was careful to minimize damage to the city itself, redirecting lightning that might have struck buildings, precisely calculating the range of her attacks. As they approached the final and largest tear near the city center, they encountered the same harbinger Naruto had seen in Mondstadt. You! Naruto recognized the mask immediately. The Wind Sage, the harbinger replied, sounding unsurprised. And Her Excellency the Shogun as well. This experiment has yielded more valuable data than anticipated. Experiment? EI's voice was cold with fury. You dare use my nation, my people, as test subjects. All of Teyvat is our laboratory, the harbinger replied calmly. The Tsaritsa sends her regards, by the way. She's particularly interested in how two divine beings from different origins interact with the tears. That's why you attacked in Azuma, Naruto realized. You knew I was coming here. You wanted to see both of us fighting the tears. Perceptive, the harbinger acknowledged. The data on dimensional stability when exposed to both traditional divine energy and your unique variant will advance our understanding considerably. EI stepped forward, lightning crackling along her naginata. You will not leave Inazuma alive. The harbinger chuckled. I've already accomplished my mission. They gestured to the massive tear behind them, which was pulsing with unstable energy. This final tear is different from the others. It's been specially calibrated to react to combined divine energies. If you attempt to close it together, well, the results should be spectacular. Naruto glanced at EI, seeing the calculation in her eyes. It's a trap, he said. They want us to combine our powers again. Indeed, EI replied softly. Yet we cannot leave the tear open. The harbinger backed toward the tear. I'll leave you to your dilemma. Either work together and trigger whatever reaction we've designed, or work separately and likely fail to close it before more abyss forces arrive. They offered a mocking bow. Choose wisely. With that, they stepped backward into the tear itself and vanished. Naruto and EI approached the pulsing rift cautiously. Up close, Naruto could see this one was different, the edges were more stable, the void within somehow deeper. Can you close it alone? EI asked, studying the tear with narrowed eyes. Naruto extended his senses in sage mode. Maybe, but it would take everything I've got, and even then, I'm not sure. What about you? EI shook her head slightly. My power could seal it temporarily, but not permanently. It is designed to resist singular divine energy. They looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Despite having just met, hours of fighting together had created a strange bond. So we either play into their hands, Naruto said, or risk leaving this thing open. There is a third option, EI said after a moment. We combine our powers, but not in the way they expect. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. They anticipate a direct assault on the tear, both of us focusing our energy on closing it from the outside. EI's eyes narrowed in concentration. But what if we destabilize it from within? You mean go inside? Naruto asked incredulously. Into the void? Not fully, EI clarified. I can project my consciousness into the plane of euthymia, a domain I control. If I can extend that projection partially into the tear while remaining anchored here. And I use Sage Mode to connect with the natural energy on both sides, Naruto continued, catching her meaning, we might be able to collapse it from the boundary rather than pushing against it directly. Ei nodded, the faintest hint of approval in her eyes. Precisely. That's insanely dangerous, Naruto pointed out. Do you have a better suggestion? Naruto grinned. Nope. Dangerous and insane is kind of my specialty anyway. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the tear. Ei closed her eyes, her body becoming surrounded by a purple aura as she began to project her consciousness. Naruto entered a deeper Sage Mode than before, extending his awareness beyond the physical. As their energies approached the tear from different angles, Naruto felt something unexpected, a resonance between his chakra and Ei's electro power, as if they were complementary frequencies rather than opposing forces. I can feel you, he said in surprise. Ei's physical form remained still, but her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. And you. Your energy, it is chaotic yet harmonious. Fascinating. Together, they extended their combined awareness into the boundary of the tear. Naruto could feel the void pulling at him, trying to draw him in completely. But he also felt Ei's presence, steady, immovable, an anchor of perfect control balancing his more wild energy. Now, Ei commanded. Naruto formed a modified hand seal, channeling his wind chakra not outward but inward, into the tear itself. At the same moment, Ei sent a precisely calculated surge of electro energy along the same path. The two powers met at the exact center of the void, and instead of fighting each other, they began to spiral together, forming a new energy that was neither wind nor lightning but something entirely different. The tear began to shrink, not violently but steadily, the edges knitting together as the combined divine energy rewove the fabric of reality. Naruto felt a sudden surge of power, not his own but flowing through him nonetheless. Ei's energy was amplifying his, just as his was amplifying hers, creating a feedback loop that grew stronger with each passing second. This is unexpected, Ei's voice echoed, sounding almost surprised. The tear closed with a soft sound like a sigh rather than the thunderous implosion they'd experienced with the others. A gentle pulse of golden-purple light spread outward, washing over the city in a wave that seemed to repair damage as it passed. As the light faded, Naruto found himself looking directly at Ei, the tear completely gone. Both of them were glowing faintly, he with golden energy, she with purple. For a moment, neither spoke, processing what had just happened. That, Naruto finally said, was not what the Harbinger expected. No, Ei agreed, studying him with new interest. It was not. She glanced around at the city, where the wave of energy had repaired broken structures and even healed some of the wounded. Our combined divinity created not destruction but restoration. That's never happened before. Naruto asked. Not in my experience, Ei replied. Divine energies typically compete rather than complement. Even among the original 7, our powers remained distinct. They were interrupted by the arrival of Sarah and several high-ranking officials, all of whom looked both relieved at the tear's closure and astonished at the miraculous repairs throughout the city. Your Excellency, Sarah began, kneeling, the invaders have been repelled. All tears have been closed. She glanced at Naruto with reluctant respect. Thanks in part to the assistance of the Wind Sage. Ei nodded. Prepare a full report on damages and casualties. And arrange suitable accommodations for our guest. She turned to Naruto. It seems we have much to discuss, Wind Sage. The implications of what happened today extend beyond a simple invasion. Naruto recognized the shift in her tone, from battlefield ally to ruler once more. But something had changed. The icy detachment he'd sensed earlier had thawed, if only slightly. I guess my diplomatic mission just got more complicated, he said with a tired smile. Indeed, Ei replied, and Naruto could have sworn he saw the ghost of amusement in her eyes. Welcome to Inazuma, Divine Wind Sage. It seems eternity must make room for unexpected change. In the days that followed, Inazuma gradually returned to normal, or as normal as things could be with a foreign god now residing in the palace as the shogun's honored guest. Rumors spread through the city like wildfire, tales of the Wind Sage's power, of how he and the shogun had fought side by side, of the strange golden-purple light that had healed both city and citizens. Some whispered that the Sakoku decree might soon be lifted. Others claimed the Wind Sage had come to challenge the shogun's authority. The more romantically inclined suggested a divine alliance of a more personal nature. Naruto, oblivious to most of these rumors, spent his time divided between strategic meetings with Inazuma's leadership and exploring the nation's unique culture. The food alone was worth the dangerous journey, in his opinion. On the 7th day of his stay, he was summoned to the shogun's private gardens, a serene space of perfect balance and harmony that few were ever invited to enter. He found Ei standing beside a reflecting pool, watching koi fish swim in lazy circles. Without her elaborate ceremonial armor, dressed instead in a simpler though still regal kimono, she seemed almost like a different person. "You summoned me?" Naruto asked, approaching with more casualness than most would dare show in her presence. "I have been, reflecting," Ei said without turning. "On the nature of your divinity compared to my own." Naruto moved to stand beside her, watching the fish. "And? You were not born divine," she stated. "Your power came later, through transformation. Mine was inherent from the beginning, I have never known existence without it." "Does that matter?" Naruto asked. Ei finally turned to look at him. "Perhaps it explains the difference in our perspectives. You still think like a mortal in many ways, despite your power. You value change, connection, impermanence. While you value eternity," Naruto finished. "Unchanging perfection. Is that criticism I hear, Wind Sage?" But there was no edge to her tone. Naruto shrugged. "Just an observation. Back in my world, I saw what isolation did to people. Cutting yourself off never protected anyone in the long run. And yet, Inazuma has prospered under my eternal watch," Ei countered. "Has it?" Naruto asked quietly. "I've walked your city for a week now. People are afraid, Ei. They're careful. That's not the same as thriving." He expected anger at his frankness, but instead, Ei simply turned back to the pool. "When one lives as long as I have, one sees patterns repeat. Nations rise, fall, destroy themselves through unchecked change and ambition. Eternity is the only path to true preservation. But what are you preserving if it's not allowed to grow?" Naruto pressed. "A flower protected under glass never dies, sure. But it never truly lives either." Ei's eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak boldly for someone who has experienced divinity for mere years rather than millennia. Maybe that's exactly why you should listen," Naruto replied with a grin. "Fresh perspective and all that." To his surprise, Ei didn't dismiss him. Instead, she seemed to genuinely consider his words. "The tears in reality," she said after a moment, changing the subject. "You believe they are connected to your arrival here?" Naruto nodded. The energy felt the same. "But these tears are being deliberately created or at least manipulated. Someone brought me here by accident, the Fatui and Abyss Order are doing it on purpose. To what end? Power, probably. Access to other worlds, other energies." Naruto frowned. "Or maybe they want to bring something here from somewhere else. Something worse than the Abyss," Ei mused. "There's always something worse," Naruto said with the weariness of someone who had faced escalating threats his entire life. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the fish. "I cannot leave Inazuma unprotected," Ei finally said. "But this threat extends beyond my borders. Beyond any single nation's concerns." Naruto waited, sensing she was working toward something. "Therefore," she continued, "I propose an alliance. Formal recognition between the divine shogun of Inazuma and the divine wind sage of Mondstadt. A pact of mutual defense against these dimensional threats. Naruto blinked in surprise. You're serious? What about the Sokoka decree? Your isolation policy? It will remain in effect for ordinary travel, EI clarified. But official channels will be established between our two divine authorities. Information will flow where physical passage cannot. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a crack in EI's wall of isolation. Naruto grinned. An alliance between gods, huh? Jean's going to flip when she hears this. He extended his hand in the casual manner of his world. You've got a deal. EI looked at his outstretched hand with a mixture of confusion and amusement. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his, a gesture entirely foreign to her traditions. The moment their hands touched, a spark of energy passed between them, golden and purple light briefly intertwining. Both pulled back in surprise. That keeps happening, Naruto observed. Indeed, EI said, studying her hand. Our energies seem unusually compatible. This bears further investigation. The way she said it, clinical, analytical, made Naruto laugh. Is that your way of saying we should hang out more? EI raised an eyebrow. I do not hang out, Wind Sage. But further cooperation may yield insights into this phenomenon. Right. Cooperation. For science. Naruto's grin widened. Whatever you say, Shogun. For a fleeting moment, something that might have been a genuine smile touched EI's lips. You are unlike anyone I have encountered in 7,000 years, Naruto Uzumaki. I get that a lot, Naruto replied. So, when do I head back to Mondstadt to tell them about our new alliance? There is no need for you to physically return, EI said. I will send an official envoy with. She stopped abruptly, her attention shifting toward the palace. Naruto felt it too, a surge of unfamiliar energy, powerful and ancient. We have another visitor, EI said, her casual demeanor instantly replaced by divine authority. One I did not invite. Before Naruto could ask who, a voice called out from the garden entrance, melodic, theatrical, and carrying an undercurrent of power similar yet distinct from EI's. My. The rumors were true. The Raiden shogun entertaining a foreign god in her private gardens. How deliciously scandalous. Naruto turned to see a woman unlike any he'd encountered in Teyvat. Her clothing was elaborate but strange, not fitting any nation's style he'd seen. Her hair flowed around her as if underwater, and her eyes held the depth of ancient oceans. Furina, EI said coldly. Former Archon of Fontaine. You trespass in my domain. The woman, Furina, placed a hand dramatically over her heart. Trespass. My dear EI, I simply had to see this wind sage everyone is talking about. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, eyes sparkling with mischief and curiosity. And my, what a sight he is. The divine energy practically radiates from him, so wild, so untamed compared to our refined essence. Naruto found himself momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence. This woman was another Archon. But EI had said, former. Hi, he finally managed. I'm Naruto. Furina laughed, a sound like water rushing over stones. He speaks. And so casually. She glided forward, circling him with undisguised interest. Fascinating. Not born of Celestia, yet undeniably divine. A god who was once human. How did you pierce the storm barrier? EI demanded, clearly displeased with the intrusion. Oh, darling, I'm the former god of justice and waters. Did you think a little lightning would keep me out if I truly wished to enter? Furina waved dismissively. Besides, your barrier has weakened since your little combined light show with the wind sage. Everyone in Fontaine is talking about it. Fontaine? Naruto asked. That's another nation. The nation of justice and Hydro, Furina explained with a theatrical bow. My former domain, before I stepped aside. EI's expression had grown increasingly stern. State your purpose here, Furina. My patience wears thin. So hostile. And here I thought we were friends, EI. Furina pouted before her expression turned more serious. Very well. I'm here because what happened between you two, that golden-purple light that repaired rather than destroyed, has implications beyond Inazuma. The tears in reality are appearing in Fontaine as well. In all nations, in fact. She turned to Naruto. And you, Wind Sage, are somehow connected to them. Your arrival in our world marked the beginning. The combination of your power with traditional divine energy reveals new possibilities. Possibilities the Fatui are eager to exploit, EA noted grimly. Precisely. Furina clapped her hands together. Which is why I'm proposing we form a triumvirate. A what now? Naruto asked. An alliance of three, EI explained, looking distinctly unenthusiastic about the idea. Not just any three, Furina continued excitedly. 3 different types of divinity, original Archon, former Archon, and whatever fascinating category you represent, Wind Sage. Together, we can understand these tiers and perhaps even control them. Naruto glanced at EI, who was studying Furina with suspicion. EI and I just agreed to an alliance ourselves, he said carefully. Wonderful. Then you're already halfway there. Furina spread her arms dramatically. The world is changing, my dears. Celestia stirs. The abyss deepens. And here stands a god from beyond our reality, bridging worlds with his very existence. She fixed them both with a surprisingly intense gaze, all theatrical pretense momentarily dropped. The question is not whether we can afford to work together, but whether we can afford not to. The garden fell silent except for the gentle sound of water. Naruto looked between the two divine women, the embodiment of eternal, unchanging authority, and Furina, the essence of flowing, ever-changing emotion. And himself? What did he represent in this unlikely trinity? Perhaps the power to connect what should be separate. To bridge divides between worlds, between ideologies. This feels like the beginning of something big, he said finally. Like the kind of moment that changes history. EI sighed, a remarkably human gesture from the god of eternity. Eternity endures even as moments change, she said, but there was a new note in her voice, something almost like resignation mixed with curiosity. Very well, Furina. State your terms for this, triumvirate. Furina's face lit up with delight. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. The 3 of us, divine beings united against cosmic threats. She clapped her hands together. I can see it now, the former Hydro Archon, the current Electro Archon, and the unexpected Wind Sage, standing together against the darkness. As Furina launched into an elaborate description of her vision for their alliance, Naruto caught EI's eye. Despite her outward resignation, he detected a glimmer of something new there, interest, perhaps. Or hope. Whatever lay ahead, whatever threats the tears in reality represented, Naruto knew one thing for certain, the world of Teyvat was about to experience change on a scale even the god of eternity couldn't ignore. And somehow, he was right in the middle of it. Again. Chapter 2, Thunder Meets Wind. Morning in Inazuma hit different. Naruto stood on the balcony of his guest quarters in the Tenshukaku, watching the sun rise over the islands. Everything here felt charged with energy, literally. The air itself seemed to hum with EI's electro power, making his skin tingle constantly. 3 days had passed since Furina's dramatic arrival and their agreement to form what she kept calling their divine triumvirate. 3 days of planning, arguing, and trying to figure out what the hell they were actually supposed to do about dimensional tears appearing across Teyvat. You're up early, came a melodic voice behind him. Naruto turned to see Furina floating, literally floating a few inches above the ground, toward him. Unlike EI's rigid formality, the former Hydro Archon moved like water itself, flowing rather than walking. Never been much of a sleeper, Naruto replied with a shrug. Too much to think about. Furina settled beside him at the balcony, her ever-present smile in place. The Electro Archon has summoned us to the training grounds. Apparently, she wishes to assess our combat compatibility. She made air quotes with her fingers, rolling her eyes dramatically. EI wants to spar. Naruto perked up. Now that sounded like fun. So clinical, isn't she? Assessment. Compatibility. Strategic evaluation. Furina sighed theatrically. 5,000 years and she still can't just say she wants to see how our powers work together. Naruto laughed. You two are total opposites. That's what makes this alliance so delicious. Furina clapped her hands together. The stoic, the theatrical, and the... She studied Naruto with sparkling eyes, the unpredictable. What a trinity we make. 20 minutes later, they arrived at EI's private training grounds, a massive space behind the palace where scorched earth and lightning-struck trees testified to the shogun's regular practice sessions. EI was already there, her hair pulled back, wearing simplified combat attire rather than her full ceremonial outfit. Even dressed down, she radiated authority and power. You're late, she stated, though they were exactly on time. Good morning to you too, sunshine, Naruto replied with a grin, enjoying the slight narrowing of her eyes at his casual address. We begin with individual demonstrations, EI continued, ignoring his comment. I must understand the full scope of your abilities if we are to combine them effectively against our enemies. Furina twirled gracefully. Who goes first in this little performance? I do so love an audience. The Wind Sage, EI decided, fixing Naruto with an expectant look. Show us what a god from another world can do. Naruto rolled his shoulders. Alright, but you might want to stand back. He stepped into the center of the training ground, feeling their eyes on him. It had been a while since he'd gone all out without an actual enemy in front of him. Showing off wasn't really his style, but hey, if they needed to know what he could do, he'd give them the full package. First, the basics, he said, forming a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Instantly, 20 perfect copies of Naruto appeared in a circle around him. Furina gasped with delight. Physical duplicates. Not illusions. She approached one clone, poking it experimentally. Each with solid form and consciousness. EI said nothing, but her eyes narrowed with interest. They're not just copies, Naruto explained. They can think independently, fight, use jutsu. And whatever they learn, I learn when they disappear. To demonstrate, he had the clones perform a series of increasingly complex wind techniques, from simple gusts to precision air blades that sliced clean through stone targets. Impressive, EI finally commented. But this is not your full power. Naruto grinned. Not even close. He dispelled the clones and closed his eyes. The familiar energy of Sage Mode flowed through him, natural chakra mixing with his own. When he opened his eyes, they had transformed, toad-like with orange pigmentation surrounding them. This is Sage Mode, he explained. I gather natural energy and balance it with my own chakra. It amplifies everything, strength, speed, sensory abilities. To demonstrate, he moved, so fast that even EI's divine eyes struggled to track him. One moment he stood before them, the next he was behind them, then atop a distant boulder, then back in his original position. In this form, I can sense everything around me for miles, he continued. Every living thing, every movement, every source of energy. Furina was watching with uncharacteristic seriousness now. You're channeling the ley lines, she observed. But differently than we do. You don't just draw from them, you blend with them. Naruto hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe. In my world, we called it natural energy. Here, it seems connected to these ley lines you mention. And this is why you can affect the tears in reality, Ei stated, watching him carefully. Your method of channeling energy creates a bridge between natural laws. There's more, Naruto said, letting his chakra build. Golden light began to emanate from him as he tapped into the power that had once belonged to Kurama but had now merged with his own. The wind around him intensified, swirling in patterns that formed visible currents in the air. This is what happened when I came to Teyvat, he explained, his voice resonating with power. My chakra merged with something in this world. The Nine-Tails energy became part of me completely, and somehow, it changed into something divine. The demonstration continued, Naruto showing abilities that blended his ninja techniques with the divine wind powers he developed in Teyvat. Raisen shurikens that could change weather patterns. Wind barriers that could deflect even divine attacks. Sage techniques that could purify corrupted land. When he finally finished, returning to his normal state, even Ei looked slightly impressed. Your power is unconventional, she said. But effective. From Ei, that was practically gushing praise. Furina stepped forward next. My turn, I believe. Where Naruto's demonstration had been straightforward and powerful, Furina's was pure spectacle. Water materialized from thin air, forming shapes and creatures that danced around the training ground. She manipulated not just water itself but states of mind, creating illusions that felt real, emotions that washed over them like waves. As the former Archon of Justice, I can see truth and falsehood, she explained, creating a sphere of water that showed reflections of Naruto and Ei, but somehow revealing aspects of themselves they kept hidden. Water reflects all, conceals nothing in the end. Naruto watched in fascination as his reflection showed not just his current self but echoes of who he had been, the lonely child, the determined genin, the hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Ei turned away from her own reflection, her expression tightening. When it was Ei's turn, the true meaning of Archon became clear. Her demonstration was precise, controlled, and devastatingly powerful. Lightning didn't just strike, it obeyed her, moving in patterns that defied natural law. She didn't just channel electro energy, she embodied it, becoming lightning itself when she moved. The Muzu no Hidotachi, she said, materializing her signature Naginata, can cut through reality itself when fully unleashed. To demonstrate, she performed a single strike against a distant mountain peak, holding back most of her power, yet still cleaving a visible slice through solid rock from hundreds of yards away. When the demonstrations concluded, the three stood facing each other, a new understanding developing between them. We are compatible, Ei announced, as if concluding a scientific experiment. The Wind Sage's abilities complement my lightning. Furina's water conducts both. Together, our powers could theoretically control the tears. Theory is wonderful, Furina said, tossing her ever-flowing hair, but practice is where the real drama happens. When do we actually start doing something about these tears? My scouts report increased Fatui activity near ancient ruins in Yashiori Island, Ei replied. We begin there, tomorrow at dawn. Naruto nodded. I should contact Mondstadt, let them know what's happening. Already arranged, Ei said. A secure messenger bird departed this morning with encoded information for your knights. You did that without asking me? Naruto raised an eyebrow. I am still the sovereign ruler of Inazuma, Ei reminded him coolly. Efficiency takes precedence over consultation. Furina giggled. Oh, this alliance is going to be so entertaining. Naruto sighed. Working with these two was going to be interesting. The ruins on Yashiori Island stretched across a desolate landscape, the remnants of an ancient civilization half buried in sand and broken stone. Perpetual rain fell from dark clouds, the lingering effect of Ei's battle with the great serpent god centuries ago. Naruto, Ei, and Furina approached on foot, having agreed that a less conspicuous arrival might yield better intelligence. Despite this, there was nothing inconspicuous about three divine beings walking together. These ruins predate even my arrival in Teyvat, EI explained as they picked their way through crumbling structures. They contain knowledge of the world before the seven. How old are you exactly? Naruto asked, jumping over a fallen column. EI gave him a sidelong glance. Over 6,000 years, as humans count time. Damn, Naruto whistled. And I thought Granny Tsunade was old. Furina stifled a laugh while EI's expression remained impassive. The Fatui wouldn't be interested in these ruins without reason, EI continued. Something here connects to the tears in reality. They moved deeper into the ruins, Naruto extending his senses in sage mode to detect any hidden presences. The rain made tracking difficult, washing away scents and sounds, but he could feel something ahead, a disturbance in the natural energy. There's a tear forming, he said suddenly, stopping. About half a mile ahead. It's not fully open yet, but it's forming. EI nodded. I sense it as well. Electro-energy fluctuates near dimensional weaknesses. Well then. Furina clapped her hands together. Let's hurry. I do so hate missing the beginning of a performance. They increased their pace, moving with the enhanced speed of divine beings. As they approached a circular structure that might once have been a temple, Naruto spotted movement, Fatui soldiers setting up equipment around what looked like a shimmering distortion in the air. There, he whispered, pointing. They're forcing the tear open. EI's eyes narrowed. 3 harbingers present. This is no ordinary operation. 3. Naruto glanced at her in surprise. That's a lot of firepower for one tear. Indeed. EI's hand moved to her sword. We should, wait, Furina interrupted, her usually playful expression suddenly serious. Look at the symbols on the ground. Around the forming tier, the Fatui had arranged stone tablets in a circle, each carved with unfamiliar symbols that glowed with a sickly light. Those aren't Fatui markings, Furina continued. They're ancient. From before the Archon War. Can you read them? Naruto asked. Some. Furina's brow furrowed in concentration. They speak of bridges. Pathways between, not just worlds, but times. She looked up, eyes wide. They're not just opening a tier to another place, they're trying to open one to another time. EI's expression darkened. Temporal manipulation is forbidden even to gods. Celestia would never permit such interference. Maybe that's the point, Naruto suggested. The Fatui work for the Tsuritsa, right? Another Archon. What if she's directly challenging Celestia's rules? Before they could discuss further, one of the harbingers, a tall figure in an elaborate mask, made a sharp gesture. The equipment around the tier hummed to life, and the distortion began to widen visibly. We need to stop them now, Naruto said, ready to move. EI placed a restraining hand on his arm. Rushing in without strategy against 3 harbingers would be foolish. So what's the plan? He asked. I will engage the harbingers directly, EI stated. My authority as an Archon may give them pause. Furina, use your water to disable their equipment. Wind Sage, your objective is the tear itself, prevent it from fully forming. Naruto nodded. It was a good plan, playing to their strengths. On my signal, EI said, drawing her sword with deliberate slowness, lightning beginning to crackle along the blade. The sky darkened further as EI's power built, thunder rumbling overhead. The Fatui operatives looked up, suddenly alert to the divine presence. Now, EI commanded, and vanished in a flash of purple lightning, reappearing directly in the center of the Fatui operation. Naruto and Furina moved simultaneously, her transforming into a flow of water that streamed toward the equipment, him using wind-enhanced speed to circle around to the tear itself. Chaos erupted instantly. EI's appearance had the expected effect, the Fatui soldiers scattered in panic, while the harbingers moved to engage her. Lightning flashed as EI parried attacks from all 3 simultaneously, her movements so fast they blurred. Furina reached the equipment, her water form solidifying as she raised her hands. The rain around them intensified, turning into needles of water that pierced control panels and shorted out power sources. Alarms blared as systems failed. Naruto reached the tear just as it began to pulse with increased energy. Up close, he could see that this one was different from those in Mondstadt and Inazuma City. Instead of empty void beyond, he glimpsed flashing images, places, times, fragments of reality flickering by too fast to recognize. Time to shut this down, he muttered, entering sage mode fully. He thrust his hands toward the tear, channeling wind chakra to compress the edges inward as he'd done before. But this time, something pushed back, a resistance that felt familiar somehow. Images flashed faster in the tear, and suddenly Naruto found himself looking at a scene that stopped his breath, Konoha, his home village, visible through the distortion. Not as he'd left it, but older, developed, with his own face carved into the Hokage monument. "What the hell?" he whispered, momentarily distracted. "The wind sage hesitates," called one of the harbingers, disengaging from EI to turn toward Naruto. He recognizes what he sees. Perfect. The harbinger, a woman with mechanical augmentations visible beneath her uniform, raised a device and fired it at the tear. Energy surged, and the images stabilized, focusing solely on Konoha. "Naruto." EI's voice cut through his shock. "Close it now." Snapping back to focus, Naruto redoubled his efforts, pushing against the tear with everything he had. But the resistance grew stronger. "It's fighting back," he called out. "This one's different." Furina appeared beside him, having disabled the equipment. "They've linked it to your energy signature somehow," she explained quickly. "It's seeking your home world specifically." The realization hit Naruto like a physical blow. This wasn't random, they had engineered this tear to find his world, using something from him as a beacon. "How?" he demanded, struggling against the growing portal. "How did they get my energy signature?" "The battle in Inazuma City," EI called out, still fighting the other two harbingers. "They collected data when we combined our powers." The female harbinger laughed. "The wind sage understands now. Yes, your unique energy is the key to selective targeting. No more random tears, we can choose our destinations." Naruto gritted his teeth, anger building. They had used his desire to protect Mondstadt and help Inazuma to gather data for their own purposes. "Not happening," he growled, his chakra flaring golden as he tapped deeper into his power. The tears shuddered but continued to grow. Through it, he could now clearly see Konoha, people walking the streets, living their lives, unaware of the dimensional window opening into their world. Furina placed her hands alongside Naruto's. "Let me help," she said, all theatricality gone from her voice. "Water adapts where wind pushes." Her hydro energy flowed into the tear, not fighting against it but working around its edges, seeking weaknesses in its structure. The combination seemed to work, the tear's growth slowed, then stopped. "It's stabilizing," Furina reported, strain evident in her voice. "But I can't close it alone." Across the ruins, he executed a perfect strike that sent one harbinger flying into a stone wall. Without pausing, she turned to engage the second, lightning arcing from her blade in devastating patterns. "Hold them off," she called to Naruto and Furina. "I need to end this quickly." Naruto nodded, understanding her plan. If they couldn't close the tear immediately, they needed to eliminate the Fatui controlling it. But just as EI prepared to unleash a more powerful attack, the female harbinger made a sharp gesture. The tear pulsed violently, and something began to emerge from it, not coming through fully, but reaching out from the other side. Black rods pierced through the dimensional opening, rods Naruto recognized instantly. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." "What is it?" Furina asked, still struggling to contain the tear. Before Naruto could answer, a pale hand followed the rods, a hand with a familiar black sleeve. Rinnegan, Naruto said, his voice tight. Those are truth-seeking rods. Someone with a Rinnegan is on the other side. The implications were staggering. The only people Naruto knew who could use such techniques were long dead in his world: Pain, Madara, Obito, Sasuke. We need EI, he decided, creating a shadow clone to help Furina contain the tear. Keep it stable. Don't let anything else come through. With that, he launched himself toward the battle, arriving just as EI dispatched the second Harbinger with a precision strike that left the Fatui agent unconscious but alive. EI, he called. We've got bigger problems. Something's coming through from my world, something that shouldn't exist anymore. EI turned, assessing the situation instantly. The third Harbinger fled toward their ship, Naruto reported. But that doesn't matter right now. If what I think is coming through that tear actually makes it here, we're all in serious trouble. Together, they raced back to the tear, where Furina and Naruto's clone were visibly struggling. More black rods had emerged, forming a pattern in the air, a summoning jutsu Naruto recognized from the Fourth Great Ninja War. We need to combine our powers, EI stated, not asking but commanding. All three of us, simultaneously. Like in Inazuma City, Naruto nodded. But controlled this time, Furina added, her usual playfulness completely absent. Directed specifically at the tear's structure. They positioned themselves around the distortion, Naruto at the front, EI to the right, Furina to the left. The black rods continued to push through, now forming a circular pattern. On my count, EI said, raising her sword. 3, 2, 1, they released their powers simultaneously, Naruto's golden wind, EI's purple lightning, and Furina's blue water, all directed at the precise center of the tear. The energies collided, but instead of fighting each other, they began to spiral together just as they had in Inazuma City, forming a new energy that was more than the sum of its parts. This time, however, they controlled it, channeling it with deliberate intent. The combination struck the center of the tear, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the black rods shuddered and began to retract, pulled back by some force on the other side. The images of Konoha wavered, distorted, and finally faded entirely. With a sound like glass shattering, the tear collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but empty air where it had been. The three divine beings stood in silence, the rain continuing to fall around them as if nothing extraordinary had happened. What, Furina finally asked, were those black rods? Naruto's expression was grim. In my world, they were used by people with the Rinnegan, an extremely powerful dojutsu. They could control gravity, summon creatures, even bring back the dead under certain conditions. And someone on the other side was attempting to establish a connection, EI stated, her eyes narrowed in thought. Yeah, but that's what doesn't make sense, Naruto ran a hand through his wet hair in frustration. Those techniques died with the Fourth Great Ninja War. Nobody should be able to use them anymore. Perhaps, Furina suggested, time flows differently between worlds. What if what you saw was the past of your world, not its present? The possibility hadn't occurred to Naruto. That would explain a lot. If the Fatui can target specific times as well as places, then the danger is greater than we realized, EI finished. They could potentially extract powers or individuals from the most dangerous periods of your world's history. The implications settled over them like the heavy rain. If the Fatui could selectively open tiers to specific points in time and space, the threats they could bring to Teyvat were limitless. We need to secure this site, EI decided, looking around at the ruins. These ancient symbols may hold the key to understanding how they're manipulating the tiers. And we need to figure out what they took from me, Naruto added. My chakra signature, my DNA, whatever they used to target my world specifically. Furina nodded, wringing water from her eternally flowing hair. I'll contact my successor in Fontaine. The current Hydro Archon has maintained the research institutions I established. They may be able to analyze what the Fatui are doing from a scientific perspective. As they began to secure the site, cataloging the ancient symbols and collecting fragments of the factory's equipment, Naruto's mind kept returning to what he'd seen through the tear, Konoha, developed beyond what he remembered, his face on the Hokage monument. Had that been the future? A future where he'd somehow made it home and achieved his dream? Or was it an alternate timeline, or what could have been that existed parallel to his current reality? And who had been reaching through from the other side? Back in Inazuma City, the mood in EI's private strategy room was tense. Maps and diagrams covered the tables, along with sketches of the symbols they'd found in the ruins. Sarah and several high-ranking officials stood at attention while the three divine beings debated their next moves. The factory won't stop with one failed attempt, Naruto pointed out, pacing restlessly. They know their approach works now, even if we interrupted this specific operation. Agreed, EI said, studying a map where reported tier sightings have been marked across Teyvat. The pattern suggests they are testing locations systematically, seeking places where the boundary between worlds is naturally thinner. Like ancient ruins, Furina added, tracing patterns on the map with a delicate finger. Places with historical significance or strong ley line concentrations. Which means we can predict their next targets, Sarah suggested, stepping forward. If we analyze the pattern, it's not that simple, Naruto interrupted. They're adapting their approach. The first tiers were random, unfocused. Now they're using my energy signature to target specific locations in my world. And potentially specific times, Furina reminded them. EI frowned, tapping her finger against the map. We must discover how they obtained your energy signature, Wind Sage. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. During the Inazuma City battle, probably. When the Harbinger said our combined powers would trigger something spectacular. They were collecting data even as they attacked, EI concluded, looking displeased at having been manipulated. Classic misdirection, Furina sighed theatrically. Make us focus on the immediate threat while their true objective unfolds unnoticed. I must say, that Tsuritsu's strategists are rather good. So what now? Naruto asked, looking between his divine allies. We can't be everywhere at once. We need to understand exactly what they're trying to access from your world, EI stated. Knowing their objective would allow us to anticipate their movements more effectively. Furina perked up suddenly. I have an idea. What if we didn't just react to tears, what if we created one ourselves? A controlled experiment. The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at her. Absolutely not, EI said flatly. Hear me out, Furina insisted, flowing across the room in her unique liquid movement. The Wind Sage's connection to his world gives us an advantage the factory lack, authentic energy resonance. If we created a small, controlled tier under laboratory conditions, we might learn what they're trying to accomplish without the risks of their brute force approach. Naruto considered it. The idea was dangerous, but Furina had a point. It might work, he said slowly, earning a sharp look from EI. Not to open a full portal, but just to peek through, see what's happening on the other side more clearly. The risk is unacceptable, EI stated, her tone brooking no argument. We have no way to ensure control over such a tear once created. Actually, Furina countered, that's not entirely true. Our combined powers already demonstrated the ability to close tiers the factory created. If we initiated one ourselves, with all three of us present from the beginning, our control would be significantly greater. EI remained unmoved. And if something came through before we could close it? We'd handle it, Naruto said with characteristic confidence. Come on, EI. We can't just play defense forever. Sometimes you have to take risks to get ahead. Eternity is not achieved through recklessness, EI replied coldly. The tension in the room thickened. Sarah and the other officials exchanged uncomfortable glances as the three divine beings faced off. Finally, Naruto sighed. Look, I get it. You're responsible for an entire nation. You can't afford to take chances that might endanger your people. He ran a hand through his hair. But this isn't just about Inazuma anymore. If the Fatui succeed in bringing something truly dangerous from my world into Teyvat, everyone suffers. Ei's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes, consideration, perhaps. What guarantees can you offer that such an experiment would remain contained? She asked finally. Naruto exchanged glances with Furina, who nodded encouragingly. We conduct it far from population centers, he suggested. Maybe on one of the outlying islands where damage would be minimal if something went wrong. And we establish strict boundaries, Furina added. A small tear, maintained for minutes only, with all three of us present and fully prepared to seal it instantly. Ei closed her eyes briefly, weighing the proposal. When she opened them again, her decision was clear. Very well, she said reluctantly. But we will implement every possible safeguard, and at the first sign of danger, we close the tear regardless of what information we might gain. Naruto grinned. Deal. Wonderful. Furina clapped her hands together. A divine science experiment. How thrilling. This is not entertainment, Ei reminded her sternly. The fate of multiple worlds may depend on our actions. Furina's expression sobered, though her eyes still sparkled with excitement. Of course, of course. Utmost seriousness, I assure you. As the meeting continued, detailing the preparations for their dangerous experiment, Naruto found his thoughts drifting back to what he'd glimpsed through the tear. If they succeeded in creating a controlled opening, would he be able to communicate with his home world? To send a message to his friends letting them know he was alive? The possibility both thrilled and terrified him. For 2 years, he'd adjusted to his new reality in Teyvat, gradually accepting that he might never return home. Opening that door, even a crack, meant reopening wounds that had slowly begun to heal. And yet, the chance to see Konoha again, even just a glimpse. Wind Sage, Ei's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Your attention is required. Sorry, he said, focusing back on the meeting. Just thinking about the implications. Ei studied him for a moment, and Naruto had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through him, that she understood exactly what he was thinking. Your personal connection to this matter is both our greatest asset and our greatest vulnerability, she said quietly. Do not allow emotion to override judgment when the time comes. The warning was clear, and surprisingly considerate coming from the usually distant Archon. Naruto nodded, recognizing both the wisdom and the concern behind her words. I won't, he promised. The safety of Teyvat comes first. Whether he could truly honor that promise when faced with a window to his home world remained to be seen. Preparations for their controlled experiment took 3 days. Ei selected a small, uninhabited island at the furthest edge of Inazuma's territory, a rocky outcropping with a flat central area perfect for their needs. Furina coordinated with researchers from Fontaine via specialized water communication devices, obtaining technical specifications for equipment that might help monitor the tear. Naruto focused on practicing precise control of his wind chakra, working to refine his ability to manipulate dimensional energy. The mood among the 3 divine beings grew increasingly tense as the day approached. Despite their power, they were venturing into unknown territory, quite literally. On the morning of the experiment, they gathered at the Tenshukaku's docks where a small, fast ship awaited to take them to the isolated island. Ei had limited knowledge of their mission to only her most trusted advisors, keeping the operation as secret as possible. Last chance to reconsider, Ei said as they prepared to board. Having second thoughts? Naruto asked, adjusting the supply pack on his shoulders. Prudence is not hesitation, Ei replied evenly. I merely ensure all parties enter this endeavor with full awareness of the risks. The risks of action versus the risks of inaction, Furina mused, stepping gracefully onto the ship. A balance every ruler must weigh. You've made your decision, Ei. Now let's see it through. The journey to the isolated island took several hours, during which each divine being prepared in their own way. Ei meditated, perfectly still at the ship's bow, communing with the electro-energy around her. Furina paced the deck, occasionally transforming parts of herself into flowing water that danced around the ship. Naruto sat cross-legged, gathering natural energy and extending his senses as far as possible, searching for any sign of Fatui activity or existing tears. They arrived as the sun reached its zenith, the small island little more than a barren rock jutting from the sea. Its isolation was precisely why EI had chosen it, nothing to damage, no one to endanger if things went wrong. "This is where my storm barrier ends," EI explained as they disembarked. "Beyond this point, the open sea leads to the borders of Liyue. We are as far from civilization as possible while remaining within my domain." The ship's crew quickly unloaded their equipment, monitoring devices from Fontaine, power sources from Inazuma's technology division, and various tools Naruto had requested for channeling his chakra more precisely. "We'll need about an hour to set everything up," Furina said, directing the placement of monitoring stations. "The calibration must be exact if we're to capture useful data." "Take what time you need," EI replied. "Precision outweighs haste in matters such as these." As Furina and the crew worked, Naruto walked to the edge of the island, looking out over the endless ocean. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay his home world, not physically in this direction, but dimensionally adjacent in ways he still didn't fully understand. He sensed EI's approach before he heard her electro-energy a constant hum that his sage-enhanced senses could detect easily. "You're conflicted," she stated, coming to stand beside him. Naruto glanced at her, surprised by the observation. "That obvious, huh?" "To one who has observed human nature for millennia, yes." EI kept her gaze on the horizon. "You fear what you might see. Or perhaps what you might not see." He chuckled humorlessly. "Both, actually. What if Konoha's gone? What if everyone I knew is dead? Or what if they're all living perfectly happy lives without me, and I'm just forgotten?" EI was silent for a moment. "I once sealed myself away for 500 years to protect my ideal of eternity," she finally said. "When I emerged, the world had changed in ways I had not anticipated. Those who remembered me were gone. New generations knew me only as an idea, a distant authority." Naruto turned to look at her fully, realizing she was sharing something deeply personal. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "The isolation?" "At the time, I believed so." Her eyes remained fixed on the distance. "I sought to preserve what I valued by removing myself from time's flow. But in doing so, I missed the very experiences that give meaning to eternity." It was perhaps the most human thing EI had ever said to him, an admission of regret, or at least of reassessment. "So you're saying I should look," Naruto concluded. "Even if what I see hurts." "I am saying," EI corrected, finally meeting his gaze, "that knowing is preferable to endless speculation. The truth, however painful, provides a foundation upon which decisions can be made. Uncertainty permits no such clarity." Before Naruto could respond, Furina called from the center of the island. "We're ready to begin. Divine beings to their positions, please." The moment of truth had arrived. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself. "Thanks, EI," he said quietly. "For the perspective." She nodded once, and together they walked back to where Furina waited with the equipment fully assembled. The setup formed a triangular pattern with monitoring devices at each point and a central space where, theoretically, the tear would form. "Each of us will take a position at one point of the triangle," Furina explained, her usual theatrical flair subdued by the seriousness of the moment. "We'll channel our energies toward the center, with the Wind Sage directing the focal point using his connection to his home world." Naruto nodded, taking his position. EI moved to hers with fluid grace, while Furina completed the triangle. "The monitoring equipment will record energy patterns, dimensional frequencies, and any visual or auditory data that comes through," Furina continued. "We maintain the tear for exactly 3 minutes, then close it regardless of results." "Agreed?" "Agreed," EI and Naruto said simultaneously. Marvelous. Furina's excitement couldn't be completely suppressed. On my count, then. 3, 2, 1, begin. The three divine beings channeled their powers toward the central point. Naruto focused intently, drawing on both his chakra and the divine wind energy that had become part of him in Teyvat. Rather than pushing against reality as he did when closing tears, he instead sought to thin the barrier, creating a controlled opening. Ei's lightning and Furina's water energies joined his, forming the now familiar spiral of combined power. The air in the center of their triangle began to shimmer, distorting like heat waves above hot sand. Dimensional variance detected, reported one of the few technicians who had remained on the island. Reading matches known tier patterns. Wind Sage, Furina called, strain evident in her voice despite her power, directed toward your world specifically. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on his memories of Konoha, the village gates, the Hokage Tower, the faces carved into the mountain. He poured those images into his chakra, using them as a beacon to guide the forming tier. The air split with a sound like tearing cloth. A small, vertical opening appeared, no larger than a doorway but perfectly stable within their triangle of power. It's working! Furina exclaimed. Maintaining boundary integrity, dimensional bleed minimal. Naruto opened his eyes to see the tier fully formed, and through it, unmistakably, was Konoha. The village looked as he'd glimpsed before, developed beyond his memories, with modern buildings alongside familiar landmarks. And there, clearly visible, was the Hokage monument with his own face carved beside those of his predecessors. That's it, he said, his voice tight with emotion. That's my home. Fascinating, Ei murmured, studying the image without breaking her concentration. The architectural style resembles ancient Inazuman designs. Focus, please. Furina reminded them, sweat beading on her brow as she worked to maintain the tier's stability. Observations later, dimensional control now. Naruto forced himself to concentrate on the task at hand rather than the sight before him. The tear was stable, contained within their triangle of power. Through it, they could see Konoha but could not hear anything, it was visual only, like watching through a window. Can we get closer? He asked. See more details. Inadvisable, Ei responded immediately. Increasing proximity may destabilize the boundary. Actually, Furina countered, the readings suggest modest adjustment is possible. Wind Sage, try shifting the focal point slightly, but be extremely precise. Naruto nodded, carefully modulating his chakra to adjust the tier's view. The image through the opening shifted, zooming in slightly to show the streets of Konoha more clearly. People walked about their daily business, unaware of being observed from another dimension. And then Naruto saw him, an older man with gray-streaked hair, wearing the Hokage's traditional hat and robes, walking down the main street. Kakashi, he whispered, recognizing his former teacher despite the years evident on his face. He became Hokage. The sight sent a wave of emotions through Naruto, pride, nostalgia, and a deep, aching loss. This was his world, continuing without him. His dream, achieved by his mentor instead. 1 minute remaining, the technician announced. Wait, Naruto said suddenly. Something's wrong. Through the tear, he could see people in Konoha stopping, looking up as if sensing something amiss. Kakashi too had paused, his head tilted back, looking directly toward the point where their tier was opening. They can sense it from their side, Ei realized. The tear is becoming perceptible. Readings show increased dimensional instability, the technician reported urgently. Something on the other side is reacting to our presence. As they watched, Kakashi formed a hand sign Naruto recognized, a sensing technique. The older Hokage's eyes widened, and he turned to shout something to nearby shinobi. They're responding defensively, Naruto warned. We need to close it now. 30 seconds early. Furina protested. The data collection, now. Naruto insisted, already shifting his chakra from maintaining the tear to closing it. Trust me, if Konoha's ninja detect a dimensional breach, they'll attack first and ask questions never. Ei immediately followed his lead, converting her energy from maintenance to closure. After a moment's hesitation, Furina did the same. Through the closing tear, they saw Kakashi and several ANBU ninja racing toward the anomaly, hands already forming jutsu seals. Just before the tear closed completely, Naruto could have sworn Kakashi's eyes met his, a flash of recognition, of disbelief, before the tear sealed with a soft pop. The three divine beings stood frozen in their positions, the triangle of power dissipating as the tear disappeared. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. Well, Furina finally said, wiping sweat from her brow, that was more exciting than anticipated. They detected us, Ei stated, her expression concerned. The barrier between worlds is more permeable than we realized. Naruto stared at the empty space where the tear had been, his heart racing. Kakashi saw me. I'm sure of it. Impossible to confirm, Ei replied, though her tone lacked its usual certainty. Visual perception through dimensional barriers is unreliable at best. The data. Furina exclaimed, hurrying to the monitoring equipment. Let's see what we actually learned before things went sideways. The technicians were already downloading information from the devices, expressions shifting between excitement and concern as they reviewed the readings. Initial analysis confirms what we suspected, one reported. The tear was attracted to the Wind Sage's energy signature. His connection to his home world acted as a beacon. Which means the Fatui are using something with his energy to guide their tears, Furina concluded. But there's more, another technician added, looking troubled. We detected energy from the other side attempting to reach through, not just passively existing, but actively responding to our tear. Kakashi and the others, Naruto suggested. They were preparing defensive jutsu. No, the technician shook her head. This energy signature registered before any visible response from the humans. It was, waiting. As if expecting a connection. A chill ran down Naruto's spine. That matches what we saw at the ruins. The black rods, the Rinnegan techniques. Someone in my world is actively trying to establish a connection to Teyvat. But who? Furina asked, her perpetually flowing hair slowing in response to her concern. And why? I don't know, Naruto admitted. Most people with those abilities died during the Fourth Great Ninja War. Unless. Unless what? Ei prompted when he fell silent. Unless they weren't from my time, Naruto finished quietly. What if the Fatui aren't just opening tears to my world, but specifically to points in its past when those powers were active? The implications settled over the group like a dark cloud. If they could extract individuals or powers from specific historical periods, Ei reasoned, they could potentially acquire abilities that no longer exist in the present. Like bringing Madara or pain to Teyvat, Naruto said grimly. Gods help us all if that happens. Furina clapped her hands decisively. Well. This experiment proved more informative than we anticipated, if not in ways we hoped. I suggest we pack up and return to the mainland immediately to analyze the data more thoroughly. As the technicians hurried to dismantle the equipment, Naruto walked away from the group, needing a moment alone. Seeing Konoha, seeing Kakashi as Hokage, it had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He found himself at the island's edge again, staring out at the endless ocean. So close, yet impossibly distant from his home. For 2 years, he'd been building a new life in Teyvat, finding purpose as Mondstadt's protector. Now the possibility of connection with his old world had been dangled before him, only to reveal new dangers. You saw your teacher, Ei's voice came from behind him. The one who achieved the position you once sought. Naruto didn't turn around. Yeah. Kakashi. He'd make a great Hokage. Ei moved to stand beside him, her gaze following his out to sea. Does it pain you? To see another achieve what you desired? The question surprised Naruto. It showed an understanding of human emotion he hadn't expected from the distant Archon. Honestly? No, he answered after a moment's reflection. I'm proud of him. Kakashi deserves it. He smiled slightly. Though I bet he complains about the paperwork constantly. I studied him with a considering gaze. Your capacity to celebrate others' achievements rather than resent them is unusual. Where I come from, that's what it means to be Hokage, Naruto explained. It's not about personal glory. It's about protecting everyone, about helping the next generation grow stronger. A philosophy not unlike that of the Archons, I observed. At least, as it was originally conceived. Before Naruto could respond to this unexpected comparison, Furina called from the center of the island. Divine beings. We have a problem. They turned to see Furina pointing at one of the monitoring devices, which was emitting a high-pitched alarm. The technicians surrounded it, expressions ranging from confusion to panic. Naruto and I hurried back to the group. What's happening? I demanded. Dimensional instability, a technician reported, pointing to rapidly changing numbers on a display. Not here, elsewhere. The tear we opened seems to have weakened the barriers between worlds across a much wider area than anticipated. Meaning? Naruto pressed. Meaning, Furina explained gravely, our little experiment may have just made it significantly easier for the Fatui to open tiers of their own. How much easier? I asked, her voice dangerously calm. The technician swallowed hard. Based on these readings, approximately 60% less energy would be required now to create a stable tear in any location within a 100-mile radius. Silence fell over the group as the implications sank in. We need to get back to Inazuma immediately, Naruto said, already moving toward the ship. If the Fatui detect this change, they will, I stated with certainty. Their sensors are sophisticated enough to register such a significant shift in dimensional stability. Which means, Furina concluded, hurrying alongside them, we've just inadvertently given them exactly what they wanted, easier access to the Wind Sage's world. And potentially to its most dangerous inhabitants, Naruto added grimly. The journey back to Inazuma City was tense, the three divine beings barely speaking as they contemplated the consequences of their experiment. What had begun as an attempt to gather information had instead created a new vulnerability, one the Fatui would undoubtedly exploit. As their ship approached the mainland, Naruto spotted something that confirmed their worst fears, dark clouds gathering unnaturally over Inazuma City, with flashes of light that weren't lightning visible within them. They're already moving, he said, pointing toward the disturbance. That's a tear forming. I's expression hardened as she stared at her capital city under threat. They dare attack Inazuma directly? Again. They're opportunists, Furina said, her usual playfulness completely gone. They detected the weakened barriers and immediately capitalized on it. Then we do the same, Naruto decided, already channeling chakra in preparation. They expect us to be away at the experimental site. We can use that surprise to our advantage. I nodded, lightning beginning to crackle around her as she summoned her power. I will not allow my nation to be used as a battlefield twice. Oh, I do love a dramatic entrance, Furina said, her confidence returning as she prepared for battle. Shall we show the Fatui what happens when they provoke not one but three divine beings? The ship was still half an hour from dock, but that wouldn't stop them. Naruto created shadow clones to help the crew while I summoned a platform of solid electro energy. This will transport us directly to the city, she explained as the platform hovered beside the ship. It requires significant concentration to maintain for passengers, so prepare for combat immediately upon arrival. The three stepped onto the lightning platform, which immediately accelerated toward Inazuma City at incredible speed, leaving the ship far behind. The wind whipped past them as they flew, the city growing rapidly larger ahead. There. Naruto pointed to the palace district, where a massive tear was forming in the sky above the main square. It's bigger than any we've seen before. The weakened barriers, Furina confirmed, her hair flowing horizontally in the wind of their passage. They're able to create something far more stable now. As they approached, they could see Fatui agents and machinery positioned around the square, civilians fleeing in panic as Sarah and the shogunate forces attempted to establish a defensive perimeter. And standing at the center, directing the operation, was a harbinger unlike any Naruto had seen before, tall, with mechanical augmentations clearly visible and a mask that covered their entire face. The doctor, Ei identified grimly. One of the Tsaritsa's most dangerous servants. A specialist in combining ancient knowledge with modern technology. And apparently dimensional mechanics, Furina added as they watched the tier widening under the doctor's direction. They were close enough now to see what was beginning to emerge from the tear, first those same black rods Naruto had recognized before, then a pale hand, then an arm clad in red clouds on black fabric. Akatsuki, Naruto breathed, recognizing the uniform instantly. That's an Akatsuki robe. Friend of yours? Furina asked, readying her hydro powers. The exact opposite, Naruto replied grimly. They were an organization of S-rank missing men who hunted Jinchuriki, people like me who contain tailed beasts. And now one is being brought to Teyvat, Ei stated, her platform approaching the city at meteoric speed. We need to close that tear before whoever it is comes through completely, Naruto insisted. Trust me, you do not want Akatsuki members running around Teyvat. Then let's make an entrance they won't forget, Furina suggested, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Ei nodded once, then accelerated their platform to its maximum speed, aiming directly for the center of the disturbance. Brace yourselves, she commanded as they hurtled toward the tear. Naruto gathered his wind chakra, Furina prepared her water, and Ei's lightning intensified around them. Together, they formed a comet of divine energy, gold, blue, and purple intertwined, streaking toward Inazuma City and the breach between worlds that threatened everything. The Fatui never saw them coming. The impact was devastating. Ei's lightning platform struck the square like a meteorite, sending Fatui soldiers flying in all directions. The shockwave disrupted their equipment, causing power fluctuations across their operation. Naruto, Ei, and Furina emerged from the crater unharmed, each radiating divine power that made normal humans step back involuntarily. The Wind Sage returns, someone shouted from the crowd that had gathered at a safe distance. And the Shogun. And, who is that? The Divine Triumvirate, Furina announced with theatrical flair, unable to resist the moment despite the danger. A catchy name, don't you think? Focus, Ei reminded her sharply, pointing at the tear above them, which continued to widen despite the disruption below. The doctor had maintained their position, protected by some kind of shield technology. They regarded the three divine beings with clinical interest. Fascinating, the Harbinger's voice was distorted through their mask. Three distinct divine energy signatures, yet harmonized to a surprising degree. Your journey to the outer island yielded unexpected results indeed. You knew about our experiment, Naruto realized, anger building within him. You've been monitoring us. Of course, the doctor replied simply. The Tsaritsa's eyes are everywhere. Your attempt to understand the tears provided valuable data that accelerated our own project considerably. Furina laughed bitterly. We played right into their hands, didn't we? No matter, Ei stated, drawing her sword. Their advantage ends now. She moved with divine speed, crossing the distance to the doctor in a flash of purple lightning. Her blade struck the Harbinger's shield, which flared brightly but held. Electro-resistance, the doctor explained calmly. Developed specifically with you in mind, Your Excellency. Naruto didn't waste time on words. He created a dozen shadow clones that immediately spread out to engage the Fatui forces while he himself focused on the tier above them. The arm had extended further, now showing a shoulder and part of a face, pale skin, red hair, and the edge of what looked like ringed eyes. Pain, Naruto whispered, recognizing the figure trying to emerge. No, no, no. He leapt upward, using wind chakra to propel himself toward the tear. Pain, or more accurately, Nagato controlling one of his 6 paths, was one of the most dangerous opponents Naruto had ever faced. If he fully emerged into Teyvat. Wind style, divine compression. Naruto shouted, thrusting both hands toward the edges of the tear, attempting to force it closed as he had done before. The tear shuddered but continued to widen. Pain's form became more distinct, one full arm now extending through, black rods clutched in his hand. Foolish, Pain's voice came through the tear, distorted but recognizable. This world calls to me. Its pain resonates across dimensions. You're not welcome here, Nagato. Naruto shouted, pouring more power into his technique. Below, Furina engaged a group of Fatui agents who were attempting to adjust their equipment. Water materialized around her, forming tentacle-like appendages that swept enemies aside while simultaneously shorting out electrical systems. Their power source, she called to EI, who was still locked in combat with the doctor. Northeast corner of the square. EI disengaged from the doctor with a lightning-fast backward step, then redirected her attack toward the indicated target, a massive generator humming with both mechanical and elemental energy. Her precision strike severed key components, causing the machine to sputter and spark. The effect was immediate, the tear's growth slowed, though it didn't begin to close. A temporary setback, the doctor commented, activating a wrist-mounted device. Fortunately, we prepared contingencies. Around the square, smaller generators activated, creating a network that quickly replaced the destroyed primary unit. The tear stabilized once more. Naruto, still airborne near the tear, found himself face to face with Pain as more of the Akatsuki member's body emerged. Naruto Uzumaki, Pain intoned, recognition evident in his ringed eyes. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Fate draws us together across worlds. I beat you once, Naruto growled, wind chakra swirling around his hands. I'll do it again. You convinced Nagato to sacrifice himself, Pain corrected. But I am not Nagato. I am merely the path he walks. And in this world, I sense no Nagato to persuade, only power to claim. The implication hit Naruto like a physical blow. This wasn't the Pain he had converted through his words, this was just the body, the weapon, without the man whose idealism had ultimately led to redemption. Before Naruto could respond, he felt a surge of hydro energy as Furina joined him in the air, carried on a column of water. Friend of yours? She asked, eyeing Pain with curiosity. Definitely not, Naruto replied. We need to push him back through and close this tear now. The traditional approach isn't working, Furina observed. Perhaps we need something less conventional. Below them, EI had engaged multiple harbingers simultaneously, her lightning sword a blur of purple energy as she fought to reach the network of generators. Despite her divine power, the Fatui had clearly come prepared with countermeasures specifically designed for her abilities. Cover me, Naruto decided, dropping back toward the ground. I need to try something with EI. Furina nodded, immediately flowing forward to confront Pain. Water collected around her in complex patterns, forming barriers that slowed the Akatsuki member's emergence. Such unusual chakra, Pain commented, studying Furina with his Rinnegan. Not like anything in our world. I should hope not, Furina replied with a theatrical flourish. I am utterly one of a kind, darling. Naruto landed beside EI, who had just dispatched another group of Fatui soldiers. We need to combine our attacks like we did in the ruins, he said quickly. But differently this time, not aimed at the tear itself, but at Pain. If we can force him back through, maybe the tear will destabilize. EI nodded once, understanding immediately. The Hydroformer Archon will need to participate as well. Our combined energy proved most effective. Furina. Naruto called upward. We need the Trinity technique. Despite the serious situation, Furina's eyes lit up with excitement. The Divine Triumvirate's first official combination attack. I knew we needed a name for it. She descended in a graceful spiral of water, landing beside them as Pain continued to emerge, now visible from the chest up, black rods extending from his body in all directions. He's using those rods to anchor himself, Naruto explained quickly. If we can sever that connection, we might be able to force him back through. Combined divine energy, focused precisely, Ei stated, positioning herself at one point of a triangle with Naruto and Furina. Not to close the tear but to sever the connection between worlds. Like cutting a puppet's strings, Furina nodded, understanding the strategy. The three divine beings began channeling their powers, Naruto's golden wind, Ei's purple lightning, and Furina's blue water, directing them not in a chaotic combination but in a precise, braided pattern that spiraled upward toward Pain. The Akatsuki member sensed the danger immediately, his Rinnegan focusing on the building energy. Shinra Tensei, he intoned, releasing a gravitational push to disrupt their attack. But the combined divine energy was unlike anything in his world. Rather than being repelled, it absorbed the gravitational force, incorporating it into the spiral and growing stronger. Impossible, Pain stated flatly, actual surprise evident in his usually expressionless face. Welcome to Teyvat, Naruto replied with grim satisfaction. The rules are different here. The spiral of golden purple-blue energy struck Pain's black rods, not destroying them but rather passing through them like they didn't exist. Where the energy touched, the connection between worlds seemed to waver, becoming transparent. It's working! Furina exclaimed. The anchors are destabilizing. Pain's expression remained impassive, but he began channeling more power through the rods, attempting to reinforce his connection to Teyvat. This world will know pain, he stated. It is inevitable. Not today, Naruto responded, pushing more chakra into their combined attack. Not ever. Ei, silent but intensely focused, increased her lightning contribution, causing the spiral to brighten and accelerate. Furina added complex patterns of water that seemed to flow between dimensions themselves, washing away the boundary between worlds. The doctor, watching from below, made a sharp gesture to the remaining Fatui forces. Increase power to maximum. We cannot lose this specimen. The generators around the square hummed dangerously, components beginning to overheat as they pushed beyond safe limits. The tear fluctuated, expanding suddenly before contracting again. Pain's body jerked, pulled between forces as the divine energy severed some connections while the Fatui technology tried to reinforce others. Black rods shattered one by one, dissolving into particles that faded from existence. This outcome was not foreseen, Pain said, his voice becoming distorted as his form began to destabilize. But Pain always finds a path. Remember that, Naruto Uzumaki. With a final surge of combined power from the three divine beings, the remaining rods shattered simultaneously. Pain's form wavered, becoming translucent, then disappeared back through the tear with a sound like thunder. But the tear itself remained, pulsing erratically as the Fatui equipment continued to force it open. We need to close it completely, Naruto said, breathing heavily from the effort. Before something else comes through. The generators, Ei stated, already moving toward the nearest one. Destroy them all simultaneously. Naruto created a new batch of shadow clones, each targeting a generator. Furina manipulated water into precise cutting jets, aiming for power connections. Ei herself became lightning, striking multiple points in the network at once. The doctor, seeing their strategy, made a decision. Initiate Protocol Omega, they commanded through their mask's communication system. Tier stability compromised. Begin extraction. Fatui forces immediately began a coordinated retreat, abandoning equipment but carrying data storage devices and key components. The doctor themselves activated some kind of teleportation device, their form shimmering as they prepared to escape. Oh no you don't, Furina called, sending a wave of water to intercept the harbinger. But the doctor had planned for this contingency. A field of cryo-energy erupted around them, instantly freezing Furina's water attack. Another time, divine triumvirate, they said, almost respectfully, before disappearing in a flash of light. With the Fatui retreating and their equipment failing, the tear began to collapse naturally. Naruto, EI, and Furina maintained their positions, channeling their combined energy to ensure it closed completely rather than merely shrinking. Finally, with a sound like air rushing to fill a vacuum, the tear sealed itself. The unnatural dark clouds above Inazuma City dispersed, allowing sunlight to return to the battle-scarred square. For a moment, no one moved. The three divine beings stood in their triangular formation, exhausted but victorious. Around them, Inazuma citizens began to cautiously emerge from shelters, while shogunate forces secured the abandoned Fatui equipment. "We did it," Naruto said finally, letting his remaining clones disappear. For now, EI qualified, her expression grim as she surveyed the damage to her city. "Oh, don't be such a pessimist," Furina sighed, her theatrical nature returning now that the immediate danger had passed. "We just prevented an interdimensional invasion. I'd call that a rather impressive debut for our divine alliance." Despite the gravity of the situation, Naruto found himself smiling at Furina's irrepressible spirit. "The divine triumvirate saves the day, huh? See? He likes the name," Furina said to EI, who merely shook her head slightly. Sarah approached, bowing deeply to EI before addressing all three. "Your Excellency, the Fatui have completely withdrawn from Inazuma City. We're securing all abandoned equipment for investigation." "Excellent work, Sarah," EI acknowledged. "Establish a perimeter around this area. No one is to touch the Fatui devices without proper authorization." "Already done, my lady," Sarah confirmed. "And, there is something else." She hesitated, glancing at Naruto. During the battle, several citizens reported seeing a figure through the tear, a figure they described as having the Wind Sage's face, but older. With a scar across his cheek. Naruto froze. "What?" "It was visible only briefly," Sarah continued. "When the tear was at its widest. According to witnesses, this figure seemed to be looking directly through the tear, as if searching for something. Or someone," Furina added, glancing significantly at Naruto. Naruto's mind raced. An older version of himself? Looking through the tear. It confirmed what he'd suspected, the Fatui weren't just targeting his world but specific points in its timeline, including what appeared to be his world's future. "Did this figure say anything?" EI asked Sarah. "Not that anyone heard," Sarah replied. The witnesses were quite distant from the tear itself. Naruto turned away, needing a moment to process this information. If an older version of himself had been looking through the tear, that meant he eventually made it back to his world, or at least, in some timeline he did. But why would his future self be searching for dimensional connections? Unless... "They're coming from both sides," he said suddenly, turning back to the group. "The tears. They're being created or at least investigated from both sides, here and in my world." EI's eyes narrowed in thought. "If your world has also developed an interest in dimensional travel, then we're looking at a potential invasion from both directions," Furina finished grimly. "The Fatui trying to bring powerful shinobi here, and someone in your world trying to access Teyvat. But why?" Naruto pressed, frustrated. "What could my world possibly want from Teyvat? And why would the Fatui want Akatsuki members here?" "Power," EI stated simply. "Your world has abilities unknown to ours. Ours has elements and divine principles unknown to yours. Those who seek dominion always desire new weapons. And new weapons require extensive testing," Furina added, her usually melodic voice hardening. Hence Pain's cryptic words about this world's pain resonating across dimensions. The implications settled over them like a shadow. If the Fatui were collaborating with elements from Naruto's world, whether past, present, or future, the threat was far greater than they had initially realized. "We need to learn more," Naruto decided. "About how they're targeting specific people and times. About why they chose Pain specifically. About who might be helping them from my side. EI nodded once. Agreed. The equipment they left behind may provide answers. And I'll contact my sources in Fontaine, Furina added. The current Hydro Archon has maintained most of my research institutions. They have the finest scientific minds in Teyvat. As they began organizing the investigation of the abandoned factory technology, Naruto found his thoughts returning to the reported sighting of his older self. What had happened in that timeline? Had he found a way home, only to start searching for Teyvat again? And more troublingly, what was Pain's final warning about? Pain always finds a path. It sounded like more than just the philosophical position Nagato had adopted, it sounded like a threat, a promise that their victory today was merely temporary. Night fell over Inazuma City as cleanup efforts continued in the square. Lanterns were brought in so work could proceed around the clock, with researchers carefully documenting and disassembling the factory equipment under EI's strict supervision. Naruto found himself standing at the edge of the square, watching the activity but lost in thought. He sensed rather than heard EI approach, her electro-energy a distinct presence he'd grown increasingly attuned to over the past days. You should rest, she said, not unkindly. Divine energy requires replenishment after such exertion. Can't sleep, Naruto replied simply. Too many questions. EI studied him for a moment before speaking again. The figure that resembled your older self. It troubles you. It wasn't a question, but Naruto answered anyway. Yeah. It means somewhere, somewhen, I made it home. But instead of living happily ever after, I started looking for ways back to Teyvat. He ran a hand through his hair. Why would I do that unless something terrible happened? There are many possibilities, EI pointed out. Not all of them terrible. Like what? Perhaps you simply wish to confirm what became of this world, she suggested. To know that those you protected here remain safe. The thought hadn't occurred to Naruto. He'd automatically assumed the worst, that his future self was searching for Teyvat out of desperation or vengeance. Maybe, he conceded. Or maybe that wasn't even me. Could have been a transformation jutsu, or genjutsu, or any number of things. Indeed, EI agreed. Speculation without data is rarely productive. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the researchers work. Despite the day's chaos, there was something peaceful about the scene, ordered, methodical, the opposite of battle's frenzy. Thank you, Naruto said suddenly. For trusting me today. For combining your power with mine against pain. EI glanced at him, a hint of surprise in her expression. Gratitude is unnecessary. Our alliance required coordinated action. I merely fulfilled my role. Still, Naruto pressed, turning to face her, it can't be easy for you, the god of eternity, to work with someone as unpredictable as me. To adjust your fighting style to complement mine. Something flickered in EI's eyes, amusement, perhaps, or acknowledgement. You underestimate my adaptability, Wind Sage. I commanded armies during the Archon War. Tactical flexibility is not foreign to me. Could have fooled me with all that talk about unchanging eternity, Naruto teased gently. To his surprise, EI didn't bristle at the comment. Instead, she looked thoughtful. Eternity does not preclude adaptation. The core remains consistent even as methods evolve. That's, actually pretty profound, Naruto admitted. And here I thought you were just stubborn. The faintest hint of a smile touched EI's lips. I contain multitudes, Wind Sage. As do you. Before Naruto could respond to this unexpected philosophical turn, Furina's voice called from across the square. Divine beings. Come quickly. We found something. They hurried to where Furina stood with several researchers around a partially disassembled device. Unlike the generators, this machine was smaller, more precise in its construction. Tell them what you told me, Furina instructed one of the researchers, who nervously adjusted her glasses. This device appears to be a targeting mechanism, the woman explained, pointing to intricate components. It contains what we believe to be biological material, specifically, samples used to target dimensional tiers to precise locations. What kind of biological material? Naruto asked, though he already suspected the answer. The researcher hesitated, glancing at EI, who nodded permission to continue. Hair, skin cells, and blood. All preserved in a solution that maintains their energy signature. She looked directly at Naruto. And based on our preliminary analysis, they appear to be yours, Divine Wind Sage. Naruto felt a chill run through him. They've been using my DNA to find my world. More than that, Furina added grimly. According to these notes, they've been using it to track your specific energy signature across different points in your world's timeline. That's how they found both Pain in the past and apparently your older self in the future. But how did they get samples of me? Naruto demanded, anger building. I've been careful. The battle in Mondstadt, EI interrupted, her expression darkening with realization. When you were injured fighting the Abyss Herald. The Fatui arrived afterward to assist with cleanup. They collected my blood, Naruto concluded, the pieces fitting together. Right from the beginning, they've been planning this. And unfortunately, they succeeded in their primary objective today, Furina said, holding up a data storage device. According to what we've decoded so far, they weren't trying to bring Pain fully into Teyvat yet, they were testing the connection, gathering data on how his Rinnegan abilities interact with our world's principles. A successful test, from their perspective, EA noted coldly. Even in failure, they achieved their goal of data collection. Naruto slammed his fist into a nearby table, cracking it. They're always one step ahead. How do we stop someone who turns every defeat into a victory? By changing the game entirely, Furina suggested, her eyes lighting up with sudden inspiration. They expect us to play defense, to react to tiers as they appear, to protect individual nations as they're threatened. What do you propose instead? EI asked, interest evident in her voice despite her usual reserve. We take the fight to them, Furina said simply. To Snezhnaya. To the Tsaritsa herself. A stunned silence followed this bold suggestion. Attacking another Archon's nation directly would violate thousands of years of divine precedent. That's ambitious, Naruto finally said, though the idea appealed to his proactive nature. It's reckless, EI countered, though without her usual finality. The Tsaritsa is one of the original 7. Her power within her domain is absolute. But she's not expecting it, Furina pressed, warming to her idea. 3 divine beings, working in perfect harmony, arriving unannounced in her frozen realm. We could destroy their research facilities before they perfect their dimensional technology. Naruto looked between the 2 Archons, considering the proposal. What about the political fallout? Wouldn't attacking another nation trigger some kind of divine war? Ordinarily, yes, EI acknowledged. But the Tsaritsa has already broken divine conventions by stealing gnosis and interfering with other nations' affairs. A targeted strike against specific Fatui operations might be justifiable to Celestia. And if not, Furina added with a dramatic flourish, better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. Especially when multiple worlds hang in the balance. Naruto found himself warming to the plan despite its risks. Taking the initiative instead of waiting for the next attack felt right to him, it was how he'd always approached problems. If we do this, he said slowly, we need perfect coordination. No room for error. We go in, destroy their dimensional research, and get out before they can bring their full military might against us. EI nodded, her tactical mind already analyzing the approach. We would need precise intelligence on facility locations. The Fatui's headquarters are well hidden within Snezhnaya. Leave that to me, Furina said confidently. I may have stepped down as Archon, but I still have connections across all nations, including eyes and ears in the Tsaritsa's court. Then we have our next move, Naruto concluded, feeling energized by the prospect of taking action rather than reacting. The divine triumvirate goes on the offensive. As they began outlining the details of their daring plan, none of them noticed a tiny mechanical bird perched on a nearby rooftop, its eyes glowing faintly as it recorded their conversation and transmitted the data to a receiver far to the north, in the frozen lands of Snezhnaya. In a laboratory deep beneath the ice, the doctor reviewed the incoming information with clinical interest. As anticipated, they murmured to another figure standing in the shadows of the room. "They plan to bring the fight to us." "Perfect," replied their companion, stepping forward enough that the pale laboratory lights illuminated distinctive ringed eyes. "When they come, all three divine signatures will be present at once. The resonance will be magnificent. You're certain your counterpart's failure today won't compromise the larger plan?" the doctor inquired. The figure, identical to Pain in appearance, yet somehow more present, more real, smiled thinly. "Failure and success are meaningless concepts from a perspective that spans worlds and times. Each interaction provides data. Each resistance refines our approach." The doctor nodded, returning to their instruments. "The Tsaritsa will be pleased with our progress. The divine principles of Tevat, combined with the chakra systems of your world, the possibilities are endless." Indeed, the pain-like figure agreed, gazing at a large map of Tevat on the laboratory wall. Two worlds, each believing they understand power, about to learn how limited their vision truly is. Around them, dozens of tubes contained suspended figures, some clearly from Tevat with elemental energy swirling around them, others bearing the distinctive characteristics of shinobi from Naruto's world. All were in various stages of transformation, their energies being systematically combined and reconfigured. "When the divine triumvirate arrives," the figure continued, "ensure all systems are prepared for maximum energy collection. Their combined signature is the key to the final phase." "Of course," the doctor agreed. "Though they believe they are bringing the fight to us, they are actually delivering exactly what we need," the figure finished, ringed eyes reflecting the cold laboratory lights. "The final components in our grand design." Outside the laboratory complex, snow fell heavily on the frozen landscape of Snezhnaya, covering all traces of the massive operation happening beneath the ice, an operation that awaited the arrival of three divine beings who believed they were launching a surprise attack, but were instead walking directly into a carefully laid trap. Dawn broke over Inazuma with a clarity that belied the tension hanging over the divine trio as they made final preparations for their journey. 3 days had passed since the battle in the square, 3 days of intensive planning, intelligence gathering, and strategic coordination. Naruto stood on the balcony of his guest quarters, watching the sun rise over the islands one last time before their departure. The beauty of Inazuma had grown on him during his stay, the nation's disciplined elegance a stark contrast to Mondstadt's free-spirited atmosphere. "Having second thoughts?" came Furina's voice as she appeared beside him, flowing through the air rather than walking. "Nah," Naruto replied, though his expression remained serious. "Just thinking about what's at stake. If we fail in Snezhnaya." "We won't fail," Furina stated with unusual firmness. "My contacts have provided detailed layouts of the Fatui research facilities. EI has developed a precise tactical approach that maximizes our unique abilities. And you?" She poked his chest playfully, "You have that wonderful knack for turning impossible situations around." Naruto couldn't help but smile at her confidence. In the short time they'd worked together, Furina's theatrical optimism had become a counterbalance to EI's stern pragmatism, and both had somehow meshed with his own determined approach to challenges. "The divine triumvirate, huh?" he mused. "Gotta admit, the name's growing on me." "I knew it would." Furina clapped her hands in delight. "Now come along. Our stern Electro friend is waiting in the war room, and you know how she feels about tardiness." They made their way through the palace corridors, where servants bowed deeply as they passed. Word of their alliance had spread throughout Inazuma, with citizens creating increasingly elaborate stories about the three divine beings who had saved the city twice now. EI awaited them in her private strategy room, already fully armored and looking every inch the divine warrior she was. Maps and documents covered the tables, with Sarah and several top military advisors standing at attention nearby. "You're late," EI stated, though without real irritation. "Fashionably so," Furina countered with a wink. "A divine entrance should never be rushed." Naruto stepped forward to examine the central map, which showed the frozen region of Snezhnaya with several locations marked in red. "These are our targets." "Confirmed Fatui research facilities," Sarah explained, pointing to the largest marking. "This one, beneath the pale forest, appears to be their primary dimensional laboratory according to our intelligence." "And our approach?" Naruto asked, looking to EI. "We will not use conventional transportation," she replied. "The journey would take too long, and we would likely be detected before reaching Snezhnayan airspace. Instead," Furina continued excitedly, "we're going to use a technique inspired by your teleportation abilities combined with EI's lightning transportation and my hydro pathways." "You figured out how to combine our powers for long-distance travel?" Naruto asked, impressed. EI nodded. "Theoretical models suggest our combined divine energies can create a temporary pathway between distant points, similar to how tears connect different worlds but controlled and directed. We're essentially creating our own divine tear between here and Snezhnaya," Furina explained. "But instead of opening between worlds, it opens between locations within Teyvat. The technique requires perfect synchronization," EI cautioned. "Any disruption during transit could have unpredictable consequences." "When you say unpredictable," Naruto began. "She means we could end up scattered across Teyvat in tiny divine particles," Furina supplied cheerfully. "But the calculations suggest only a small chance of that happening." "How small?" Naruto pressed. "Small enough," EI stated with finality. "The risk is acceptable given the alternative of conventional travel." Naruto sighed. "All right then. Divine teleportation it is. When do we leave?" "Immediately," EI replied. "Our intelligence suggests the Fatui are accelerating their research following their partial success in Inazuma. We cannot afford delay." The three divine beings moved to a specially prepared chamber beneath the palace, a circular room with intricate patterns carved into the floor and walls, designed to focus and channel their combined energies. Sarah and the other officials remained at the entrance, unable to safely enter once the divine energies began flowing. "Remember your instructions," EI told Sarah. "If we have not returned or made contact within 48 hours, implement the contingency protocols." Sarah bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Excellency. May victory and safe return be yours." As the doors closed, leaving the three alone in the chamber, Naruto felt a sudden weight of responsibility. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, divine beings working in perfect harmony to transcend normal limitations of space. "Positions," EI directed, moving to one point of the triangular pattern on the floor. Furina flowed to another point, her expression unusually focused. Naruto completed the triangle, feeling the subtle energies already beginning to resonate between them. "The technique requires 3 phases," EI explained one final time. "First, we create the pathway using our combined energies. Then we transit through it as a unified consciousness. Finally, we rematerialize at our destination." "The unified consciousness part is where it gets interesting," Furina added with a meaningful glance at Naruto. "Our minds will essentially merge during transit. So, try to keep your thoughts tidy, dears." "Great," Naruto muttered. "No pressure there." "Focus," EI commanded, closing her eyes as purple energy began to emanate from her form. "Channel your divine essence toward the center point, but maintain your individual nature." Naruto and Furina followed suit, golden wind and blue water energies flowing from them to meet EI's lightning at the triangle center. As before, the energies began to spiral together, forming something new, a golden purple-blue vortex that gradually expanded upward and outward. "Now," EI instructed, her voice resonating with power, "envision our destination. The Pale Forest Laboratory. See it in your mind with perfect clarity. Naruto focused on the images Furina's contacts had provided, a snow-covered forest concealing an underground facility, the precise coordinates, the energy signature they would seek. The vortex accelerated, creating a tunnel of light that extended upward through the ceiling, seemingly passing through solid matter without affecting it. Transit phase initiating, EI announced, her physical form beginning to dissolve into pure energy. Maintain your focus. Do not resist the unification. Furina followed, her body transforming into flowing light that merged with EI's lightning essence in the vortex. See you on the other side, Wind Sage. Naruto took a deep breath and released his physical form, allowing his consciousness to merge with his divine energy as it flowed into the combined vortex. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced before, not painful, but profoundly disorienting. His sense of self expanded dramatically, suddenly encompassing three distinct perspectives simultaneously. He could feel EI's consciousness, ordered, ancient, layered with experiences spanning millennia. Her thoughts moved with precision, maintaining the pathway's structure with unwavering focus. Beneath that discipline, he sensed deeper currents of loneliness, responsibility, and a carefully guarded capacity for care that surprised him. Furina's mind flowed around his like water itself, dynamic, emotional, constantly shifting. Her theatrical exterior concealed depths of wisdom and sorrow, the burden of a former god who had witnessed both the best and worst of humanity during her reign. Her apparent frivolity was a choice, a response to having seen too much suffering. And they, in turn, experienced Naruto, his determination, his pain, his unwavering belief in connections between people. They saw flashes of his past, the lonely child, the struggling genin, the hero who had saved his world only to be torn from it. They felt his grief for what he'd lost, but also his growing attachment to Teyvat and its people. For what seemed like both an instant and an eternity, the three existed as one consciousness, moving through the pathway they had created between worlds. No secrets, no barriers, just pure understanding of each other's true nature. Then, with a sensation like emerging from deep water, they began to separate once more. Individual forms coalesced from the combined energy, divine essence rebuilding physical bodies as they approached their destination. Naruto gasped as he rematerialized, dropping to one knee in snow. Cold air filled his lungs, the shock of transition leaving him momentarily disoriented. Around him, Ai and Furina were similarly recovering, their divine forms solidifying in the frozen landscape. That was. Naruto began, struggling to find words for the experience. Intimate, Furina supplied, her usual playfulness subdued by the profundity of what they had shared. Ei said nothing, but her eyes met Naruto's with a new depth of understanding. No words were necessary, they had experienced each other's minds in ways that transcended language. They stood in a clearing surrounded by pale, almost white trees, their branches heavy with snow. The air was bitingly cold, the sky a steely gray that promised more snowfall soon. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth against the horizon. Snezhnaya, Ei confirmed, her breath visible in the frigid air. The pale forest, approximately 2 kilometers from the laboratory complex. I can sense it, Naruto said, extending his awareness in sage mode. Underground, heavily shielded, but there's a lot of activity. Different types of energy, some familiar, some not. We should move quickly, Furina suggested, already adapting her hydro form to the cold environment. The teleportation may have been detected despite our precautions. They moved through the forest with divine speed, leaving barely discernible tracks in the fresh snow. Naruto led the way, his sage-enhanced senses allowing him to detect patrols and security measures before they came into view. As they approached the facility's location, the true scale of the Fatui operation became apparent. What had appeared on maps as a single laboratory was in fact an extensive complex spanning several acres beneath the forest floor, with multiple surface entrances disguised as natural features. This is bigger than we thought, Naruto whispered as they crouched behind a ridge overlooking the main entrance, a seemingly ordinary cave mouth guarded by Fatui skirmishers in heavy winter gear. Indeed, EI agreed, her eyes narrowed as she assessed the defenses. The energy signatures suggest at least 3 distinct research divisions operating simultaneously. And look, Furina pointed to a clearing where Fatui agents were setting up familiar equipment. They're preparing to open another tear. We need to move now, Naruto decided. Before they can activate it. Direct approach or stealth? Stealth initially, EI replied. We cannot risk alerting the entire complex before reaching the central laboratory. Stealth it is, Naruto agreed, forming hand signs to create 3 shadow clones. My clones will create diversions at the secondary entrances. We'll use the confusion to infiltrate the main facility. The plan worked initially. Naruto's clones caused sufficient chaos at the auxiliary entrances to draw security forces away from the main entrance, allowing the 3 divine beings to slip inside undetected. They moved through the facility's outer levels with surprising ease, disabling guards with precise, non-lethal strikes. This is too simple, EI observed as they descended further into the complex, encountering minimal resistance. A facility of this importance should have multiple layers of security. Maybe they're all occupied with whatever big experiment they're preparing, Naruto suggested, though he shared her concern. Or perhaps, Furina added grimly, they want us to reach the central laboratory. The implication hung in the air between them. After their shared consciousness during transit, they didn't need to verbalize the possibility that they were walking into a trap. They reached a massive set of doors marked with both the Fatui insignia and unfamiliar symbols that Naruto recognized with a chill, characters from his world, specifically those associated with forbidden jutsu. This is it, he said quietly. Whatever they're doing with the tears, the heart of it is behind these doors. EI studied the security mechanisms with her ancient knowledge. Complex, but not impenetrable. The locks respond to elemental energy. Allow me, Furina offered, flowing forward to manipulate the hydro components of the locking mechanism. With delicate precision, she redirected the flow patterns until something clicked inside the massive doors. Ready? Naruto asked, preparing both wind chakra and shadow clone jutsu for whatever awaited them. EI nodded once, her naginata materializing in her hand. Furina stepped back into formation, water swirling around her hands in complex patterns. The doors swung open silently, revealing a laboratory space so vast it seemed impossible that it could exist underground. The ceiling rose at least 50 feet above them, with multiple levels of walkways and research stations surrounding a central area dominated by what could only be described as an artificial tear, a stabilized dimensional opening contained within an elaborate framework of machinery. But it wasn't the tear that stopped them in their tracks. It was what surrounded it, dozens of transparent tubes containing suspended figures, some clearly from Teyvat with elemental visions visible on their bodies, others bearing the distinctive characteristics of shinobi from Naruto's world. And standing at a control panel, apparently expecting them, was the doctor alongside a figure Naruto recognized with growing horror, pain, or someone identical to him, but somehow more substantial than the version that had partially emerged in Inazuma. Welcome, the doctor greeted them with clinical courtesy. The divine triumvirate, right on schedule. What is this place? Naruto demanded, his anger building as he saw the imprisoned test subjects. What are you doing to these people? Advancement, the doctor replied simply. The next evolution in power across worlds. Pain stepped forward, his ringed eyes studying the 3 divine beings with detached interest. Naruto Uzumaki. And the gods of this world. Your arrival completes our requirements. EI's lightning crackled dangerously around her. You anticipated our attack. Of course, the doctor confirmed. Your decision to bring the fight to us was precisely what our models predicted. Divine beings are powerful but often predictable in their responses to threats. You orchestrated everything, Furina realized, her usual playfulness completely gone. The attacks on Mondstadt and Inazuma, they were all to manipulate us into coming here. Manipulation implies deception, Pain countered. We merely created circumstances that would inevitably lead to this moment. Your choices were your own. Enough talk, Naruto growled, golden energy beginning to emanate from his form as he prepared to attack. Whatever you're planning ends now. The doctor smiled behind their mask. On the contrary, Wind Sage. It begins now. They pressed a sequence on the control panel, and the artificial tear in the center of the laboratory pulsed with sudden energy. Simultaneously, fields of force erupted around the three divine beings, not restraining them but rather extracting energy from their divine forms. What? Naruto gasped as he felt his chakra being forcibly channeled into the machinery. The unified divine signature, the doctor explained as alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The perfect catalyst for stable cross-dimensional integration. EI slashed at the energy field with her naginata, but the lightning that would normally destroy such barriers was instead absorbed and redirected to the central tear. Resistance is counterproductive, Pain stated calmly. Each attempt to break free simply accelerates the process. Furina attempted to flow between the energy patterns as water might find gaps in a barrier, but discovered that the field had been specifically designed to counter her hydro abilities. They've studied us, she realized aloud. They know exactly how our powers work. The benefits of patience and observation, the doctor confirmed. The Tsaritsa has been planning this for centuries, long before the Wind Sage's arrival accelerated our timetable. The artificial tear began to widen dramatically, but unlike previous tears, this one didn't show a single location or time. Instead, multiple images flashed within it, Konoha at various periods, Inazuma throughout its history, lands Naruto didn't recognize that must be from Teyvat's distant past. A master tear, the doctor explained with evident pride. Capable of accessing any point in either world's timeline simultaneously. And soon, with your divine energies as the stabilizing force, permanently. Naruto struggled against the energy field, trying every technique he knew to break free. Shadow clones dissipated as soon as he created them, absorbed by the field. Wind chakra was redirected to the tear. Even Sage Mode energy was carefully harvested rather than allowing him to use it. Why? He demanded, looking directly at Pain. What does the Akatsuki gain from this alliance with the Fatui? The Akatsuki was merely a stepping stone, Pain replied. A necessary phase in a much larger plan. In this world, I serve a greater purpose, the unification of all forms of power under a single authority. The Tsaritsa, Ei stated, her voice tight with fury. Among others, the doctor said cryptically. The alliances that have formed around this project extend beyond your comprehension. As they spoke, the laboratory doors behind them slid open, and more Fatui forces entered, not standard soldiers, but beings that made Naruto's blood run cold. They appeared to be hybrids, with characteristics of both Fatui agents and shinobi from his world. Some had visible visions embedded in their bodies alongside what looked like chakra modification implants. The first generation of transcendent beings, the doctor announced proudly. Capable of wielding both elemental power and chakra simultaneously. Imperfect still, but functional. You're creating an army, Furina realized, horror evident in her voice. A vanguard, the doctor corrected. For what comes next? The artificial tear pulsed again, now large enough to fill the center of the laboratory. Through it, Naruto could see multiple timelines and locations simultaneously, as if reality itself had been fractured into a kaleidoscope of possibilities. And emerging from this chaos of times and places came figures, some Naruto recognized with dread, others unknown to him but clearly powerful beings from Teyvat's history. Madara, he whispered, seeing the legendary Uchiha step partially through the tear, observing the laboratory with calculating eyes. Kagaya. Obito. Selected individuals from optimal points in the timeline, Pain explained. Those whose powers complement our objectives. This is madness, Ei stated, still fighting against the energy field despite its continued absorption of her power. Disrupting the natural order of worlds and times will have consequences beyond your control. Control is precisely what we seek, the doctor replied calmly. And with the divine triumvirate as our permanent energy source, we will achieve it. The revelation hit Naruto with sickening clarity. They weren't planning to kill the three divine beings. They intended to use them as living batteries, perpetually powering their dimensional manipulations. Not happening, he growled, looking to EI and Furina with sudden determination. Despite the barrier between them, their recent shared consciousness during teleportation had created a connection that transcended physical separation. He could sense their thoughts, their intentions, without words. EI nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Furina's eyes flickered with understanding. Instead of fighting against the energy extraction, all three suddenly stopped resisting, and then pushed their divine powers outward voluntarily, flooding the system with far more energy than it was designed to handle. No, the doctor shouted, recognizing their strategy too late. The calibration, the artificial tear shuddered, expanding rapidly beyond its containment field as the three divine beings poured their combined power into it, not fighting the extraction but overwhelming it. If we can't stop the tear from opening, Naruto called to his companions, we make it too big for them to control. The laboratory systems began to overload, panels exploding in showers of sparks as the tear expanded beyond all planned parameters. The hybrid soldiers fell back in confusion, their conditioning unprepared for this scenario. Pain alone remained calm, watching the chaos with detached interest. Fascinating, he commented as reality itself seemed to warp around them. Your solution mirrors my own philosophy. When a system cannot be reformed, it must be destroyed completely. The doctor frantically worked the remaining controls, trying to stabilize the rapidly deteriorating situation. Containment failing. All personnel evacuate to safe zones immediately. The energy fields restraining the three divine beings flickered and failed as the power was redirected to emergency containment systems. Released from their constraints, Naruto, EI, and Furina immediately moved to position themselves around the now massive tear, which threatened to engulf the entire laboratory. We need to close it, Naruto shouted over the alarms and the growing roar of dimensional energy. Same technique as before, but amplified. EI and Furina nodded, taking positions to form a triangle around the tear. As they prepared to channel their combined power, the doctor made a desperate move, activating emergency protocols that caused the laboratory floor to separate, creating a chasm between the divine beings. You cannot interfere, the doctor called out. The process has advanced too far, closing it now will cause a dimensional collapse that could destroy both worlds. He's lying, Furina shouted to her companions. The reading suggests controlled closure is still possible. Naruto created shadow clones to bridge the gaps between them, forming physical connections that allowed their energies to still flow in a triangular pattern despite the separated floor. Focus everything on the tear's center, EI commanded, her lightning arcing through Naruto's clones to connect with Furina's water energy. As their powers began to combine once more, Pain stepped directly into the path of their convergence, his Rinnegan glowing with unusual intensity. Your efforts are substantial, he acknowledged. But ultimately futile. This moment has been planned across dimensions and time itself. To demonstrate his point, he activated a Rinnegan technique, but instead of the familiar gravitational push, this one somehow absorbed and redirected their combined divine energy, sending it back into the tear in a reversed pattern. He's using our own power against us. Furina called out in alarm. Then we change tactics, Naruto decided instantly. Instead of closing the tear directly, we target the machinery sustaining it. Understanding his strategy immediately, EI redirected her lightning toward the complex array of generators powering the artificial tear. Furina followed suit, sending precision jets of water to short-circuit control systems. Naruto himself targeted the central power core with a perfectly formed Raiden shuriken. The doctor, seeing their new approach, made a decision. Protocol Omega. Repeat, Protocol Omega. Throughout the facility, secondary explosions began as self-destruct sequences activated. The laboratory began to collapse around them as support structures failed. They're scuttling their own research. Furina exclaimed in disbelief. To prevent us from gaining access to it, EI concluded grimly. A calculated sacrifice. The artificial tear, now unstable and fluctuating wildly without its supporting machinery, began to collapse on itself, not closing cleanly but imploding with increasing violence. This is going to be bad, Naruto warned, recognizing the pattern from previous tear collapses. Everyone get behind me. He quickly formed hand signs for his strongest wind barrier, creating a dome of compressed air around the three divine beings as the tear reached critical instability. The doctor and Pain were already retreating through hidden exits, the hybrid soldiers following in disciplined formation despite the chaos. The last thing Naruto saw before the tear collapsed completely was Pain's Rinnegan eyes meeting his across the disintegrating laboratory, not with hatred or anger, but with something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. Then the tear imploded with a force that shook the entire mountain range, creating a shockwave that devastated everything within a mile radius. Naruto's wind barrier, reinforced by EI's lightning and Furina's water, protected them from the worst of the blast, but the laboratory around them was completely destroyed, burying them under tons of rock and metal. For several minutes after the collapse, all was dark and silent. Then, with a surge of combined divine energy, the rubble above them shattered outward, revealing the three divine beings, battered and drained, but alive. They emerged into what had become a massive crater in the pale forest, snow already beginning to fill the depression as the storm intensified around them. Of the factory facility, nothing recognizable remained, just twisted metal and shattered stones scattered across the blasted landscape. They escaped, Naruto stated flatly, sensing no traces of the doctor or Pain within the debris. With most of their research data, Furina added, examining a partially intact console that had been ejected clear of the main collapse. And apparently, samples. EI surveyed the destruction with narrowed eyes. They sacrificed this facility willingly. Which means this wasn't their only laboratory, Naruto finished the thought. This was just one branch of whatever they're doing. The implications settled over them like the falling snow. Their bold offensive had been anticipated, countered, and ultimately turned into yet another data point for their enemy's research. We need to regroup, EI decided, her tactical mind already assessing their next moves. Return to Inazuma, analyze what little information we salvaged, and develop a new strategy. Agreed, Furina said, unusually subdued by their defeat. The traditional approach clearly isn't working against enemies who can literally see across time and dimensions. Naruto stared at the crater, frustration and determination warring within him. At least we stopped this tear. Bought some time before they can set up another facility of this scale. Perhaps, EI acknowledged, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. But time may be the one resource they have in abundance, given their ability to access different points in the timeline. As they prepared to activate their combined teleportation technique for the return journey, Naruto spotted something half buried in the snow, a small data device that had somehow survived the destruction. He retrieved it quickly, tucking it into his pocket without comment. Whatever information it contained might provide insights the Fatui hadn't intended to share. The return teleportation was less disorienting than the initial journey, their minds already familiar with the experience of shared consciousness. Nevertheless, the brief union of their thoughts revealed the same concern echoing through all three divine beings, the sense that despite their best efforts, they were playing a game whose rules they didn't fully understand, against opponents who had planned moves far in advance. They rematerialized in the chamber beneath the Tenshukaku, immediately collapsing to their knees from the combined strain of battle and dimensional travel. Sarah and the waiting officials rushed forward in alarm, calling for medical assistance despite Naruto's assurances that divine beings recovered quickly. As the immediate chaos of their return settled, Naruto found himself sitting alone in a quiet corner of EI's private gardens, examining the data device he recovered from the destroyed facility. Its interface was unfamiliar, designed for Snesnean technology he had no experience with. Find something interesting? Furina asked, flowing into existence beside him with her usual dramatic flair, though subdued by exhaustion. Maybe, Naruto replied, showing her the device. Can you access it? I'm not exactly tech-savvy. Furina took the device, turning it over in her delicate hands. Fontaine specializes in technology. This looks like a standard Fatui field recorder, but with some modifications. She manipulated several small buttons, and a holographic display flickered to life above the device. What is it? Naruto asked, studying the complex diagrams and unfamiliar script. Project notes, Furina murmured, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she scrolled through the information. Technical specifications for, oh my. What? Naruto pressed. They're not just opening tiers to access your world, Furina explained, pointing to specific sections of the display. They're studying how to merge the fundamental principles of both realities. Combining chakra networks with vision systems, merging elemental energy with nature energy. Creating hybrids, Naruto recalled the soldiers they'd seen in the facility. But why? What's the endgame? That's the troubling part, Furina continued, accessing deeper files in the device. According to this, they believe both our worlds are incomplete. Fragments of what was once a unified reality, separated by some ancient cataclysm. And they're trying to put them back together. Naruto guessed, trying to understand the implications. Not exactly, came Ei's voice as she approached, having overheard their conversation. They are attempting to forge a new reality that combines elements of both worlds, one under the control of whoever masters the unification process first. She gestured for Furina to continue examining the device, her expression grave. Such ambition goes beyond mere conquest. It threatens the fundamental structure of existence itself. But is it even possible? Naruto asked. Merging entire worlds? Perhaps, Ei replied after a moment's consideration. The ancient texts speak of times before the seven, when reality was more malleable. When the divine principles that now govern Teyvat were still being established. And in my world, Naruto added, thinking of Kaguya and the divine tree, there are legends of how chakra itself came to humanity, stories that hint at connections to other dimensions. Which means, Furina concluded, looking up from the device, that the Fatui may have discovered a truth about our worlds that we ourselves have forgotten. A shared origin, perhaps. Or at least, a fundamental compatibility that makes merger possible. The three divine beings fell silent, contemplating the scale of what they faced, not just tiers between worlds, not just interdimensional invaders, but a potential rewriting of reality itself. We need allies, Naruto finally said. More than just the three of us. If this affects all of Teyvat and my world too, then everyone has a stake in stopping it. The other Archons, Ei agreed reluctantly. Despite our differences, this threat transcends old conflicts. And key figures from your world, Furina added, turning to Naruto. If we could establish controlled communication through a tear of our own creation. It would be dangerous, Naruto acknowledged. But yeah, if we could contact Kakashi or some of the others, explain what's happening, they might be able to help from their side. Ei rose, decision made. We begin immediately. Furina, use your connections to arrange a gathering of the seven, or as many as will answer the call. Wind Sage, work with our researchers to develop a secure method of communication with your world. And what will you do? Furina asked, already moving to implement her assignment. Ei's expression hardened, lightning briefly crackling around her form. I will inform Celestia directly. This threat has grown beyond what can be addressed through conventional means. The significance of this decision wasn't lost on Naruto or Furina. For an Archon to petition Celestia directly was extremely rare, an acknowledgement that divine intervention of the highest order might be necessary. As they parted ways, each focused on their crucial task, Naruto felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. The enemy they faced was more powerful and far-seeing than any he had encountered before, even Kaguya had been more straightforward in her goals and methods. But for the first time since arriving in Teyvat, he felt the potential for true connection between his old world and his new one. Not the destructive merger the Fatui sought, but a bridge of understanding and cooperation against a common threat. And perhaps, when the crisis was resolved, a way to finally reconcile the two halves of his existence. In the frozen wasteland far to the north, beyond even Snezhnaya's borders, the Doctor and Pain arrived at a secondary facility, larger and more advanced than the one they had sacrificed. The Tsaritsa herself awaited them, her divine form radiating cold that would kill any normal human instantly. The divine triumvirate performed exactly as predicted, the Doctor reported, kneeling before their god. The energy signatures have been collected and analyzed. The sacrifice of the Pale Forest facility has accelerated our timeline considerably. And the Wind Sage, the Tsaritsa inquired, her voice like ice crystals chiming against each other. His connection to the other world remains stable. More than stable, Pain answered, standing where others would kneel. His divine transformation has made him the perfect conduit between realms. When the time comes, his energy signature will be the keystone of the entire unification process. Whether he cooperates or not, the Doctor added with clinical detachment. The Tsaritsa nodded once, satisfied. Then we proceed to the final phase. Alert our allies on both sides. The convergence begins at the next solstice. Behind her, visible through massive windows, stretched an operation that dwarfed the destroyed facility, thousands of hybrid soldiers in various stages of development, machinery that made the artificial tear look primitive by comparison, and at the center, a structure that resembled a massive tree with mechanical components interwoven through its branches. The divine tree, Pain observed, studying the construct. A fitting symbol for our work. In my world, it brought chakra to humanity. In this one, it will bring unification to reality itself. And to those who resist this evolution, the Tsaritsa asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. Pain's Rinnegan eyes reflected the cold light of the frozen realm as he replied, they will know pain, across all worlds and times. Simultaneously and eternally. As snow continued to fall outside the facility, covering all evidence of their work from prying eyes, the final pieces of a plan centuries in the making were set into motion, a plan that would soon bring the divine triumvirate face to face with the true scale of the threat they had only begun to comprehend. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.